My cousins got mad when I replaced their photos with my dog's. When I was a kid, I always felt like the odd one out in my family. I wasn't the loud, attention-grabbing type. My cousins, Ashley, Brandon, and Megan, were always the stars at every family gathering. The perfect trio, as my aunt loved to call them, every Christmas, Thanksgiving. Even random Sunday dinners at Grandma's house turned into some kind of stage for them. They'd sing, show off their trophies, talk about their sports teams, and my parents would politely clap along while I just sat there. Now, I'm 31, living in Nashville, and I've got my own little house with my own little family, me and my golden retriever, Milo. Milo's been my best friend since the day I adopted him. I found him at a shelter 5 years ago, this scared, scruffy pup that no one wanted because he had a limp. I fixed him up, and since then, he's been glued to me like my shadow. He's the reason I started hiking again, socializing again, even dating again. He's basically family. A few months ago, I hosted a family dinner at my place for the first time ever. I was honestly excited, but also a little anxious. My mom was thrilled I was finally participating. I cleaned the house top to bottom, cooked everything myself, and even decorated the walls with framed pictures, mostly of my friends, my dog, and a few scenic shots I'd taken during hikes. It was cozy, warm, and very me. Then my Aunt Paula showed up. Now, Aunt Paula is the self-appointed curator of family tradition. She walked into my living room, looked around for about 10 seconds and said, "Oh, you didn't put up the family photos?" I was confused. What family photos? She rolled her eyes like I should have known. The ones we've been sharing for years, you know, from Grandma's albums, your cousins' graduations, weddings, holidays, the family reunions. You were supposed to hang them so it feels like home. I didn't remember agreeing to that. But apparently, when my mom told everyone I was hosting, Aunt Paula sent her a digital folder of pictures that I should print and frame. I never got the email because my mom forgot to forward it. So, yeah, I didn't have the official family photos up. After dinner, she gave me the stink eye and said, "It would be nice if next time you honored the family properly." That night, I looked up the folder. Sure enough, it was filled with dozens of photos of Ashley's wedding, Brandon's graduation, Megan's baby shower, and a few generic family portraits. I noticed there wasn't a single picture of me in any of them. Not even one. That stung. I was there for some of those events. I took pictures with everyone, but apparently, I didn't make the cut for the official family folder, so yeah, maybe I was a little petty. The next time Aunt Paula said she was visiting, I decided to do a little decorating. I went to Walmart, bought a dozen matching frames, and printed all new photos. Every single one was of Milo. Milo in a bow tie, Milo with his tongue out, Milo sleeping on the couch, Milo running through the woods, Milo at the beach, Milo with a tiny birthday hat. I lined the hallway with them, placed one on the mantel, 2 by the dining table, 1 next to the TV. I even swapped out an old picture of me and my mom with one of Milo wearing sunglasses. When Aunt Paula and my cousins came over that Sunday, the look on their faces was priceless. Ashley laughed first, like she thought it was a joke. "Oh my God, you're obsessed," she said, pointing to a framed photo of Milo in a Christmas sweater. Brandon frowned. "Wait, where's all the family stuff? Didn't Mom send you the folder?" I smiled and said, "Yeah, I saw it. But since none of those photos had me in them, I figured I'd decorate with my actual family." Then I gave Milo a treat and said, "Say hi, buddy." Paula gasped like I'd just insulted the Pope. "You replaced the family portraits with your dog?" "Technically, I replaced strangers with someone who lives here," I said. She went off. She said I was being disrespectful, self-centered, disconnected from family values. Megan, who always tries to stay neutral, just kind of smirked into her drink and muttered, "I mean, the dog is really cute." That didn't help. Aunt Paula left early, muttering something about family shame and modern selfishness. My mom called me later that night and said Paula was furious, saying I'd mocked the family legacy. I told her that if the family legacy didn't include me, I didn't see the point in showcasing it. Mom sighed and said, "You know she takes that kind of thing seriously," I replied. "So do I. I take being ignored seriously." After that, I thought things would blow over. But then Brandon posted on Facebook, "Some people think dogs are better than family. Sad world we live in." The comments section turned into this passive-aggressive festival of family drama. Ashley texted me privately saying she actually thought it was funny, but I could tell she didn't want to publicly side with me. Megan sent me a photo of her cat framed on her bookshelf with the caption, "Solidarity." At first I felt a little guilty. Maybe I had gone too far. But then I remembered every single time my achievements were overlooked. The time I got a job promotion and no one cared because Ashley got engaged that same week. The time I brought my ex to Christmas and Paula spent the entire dinner asking him about his family instead of asking about us. I've always been the background character in this family's story. And for once, I just wanted to be the main character in my own house. It's been 3 weeks now, and no one's really talked to me except Megan, who thinks I'm iconic. My mom's trying to stay neutral, but she's admitted she laughed when she saw the pictures. Aunt Paula, however, has declared she won't come over again until the real family is represented. I told her that was fine. Milo and I like our peace and quiet. Sometimes, when I sit on the couch and see Milo's goofy face framed on the wall, I can't help but smile. For once, the walls of my home reflect something that actually makes me happy. Not someone else's idea of what family should look like. If that makes me the villain in the family story, so be it. At least I'm the villain with a really good boy by my side. Update. The family group chat explosion and what happened after, so things didn't cool down like I thought they would. If anything, the Milo wall became this weird symbol of rebellion in the family. I thought maybe it would be a few awkward weeks and everyone would move on. Nope. I underestimated Aunt Paula's dedication to drama. About a week after my post, my mom invited everyone to a Sunday dinner at her house to smooth things over. I didn't really want to go, but she begged me, just come. Don't mention the pictures, don't bring Milo, and try to be nice, she said. I agreed, thinking maybe we could finally put it behind us. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Paula was already there, arms crossed, lips pursed like she'd been saving up disapproval just for me. My cousins were there too, Ashley scrolling through her phone, Brandon nursing a beer, and Megan trying to keep the peace like always. The conversation started light, small talk, weather, football. Then Paula cleared her throat dramatically and said, I think we all need to talk about the elephant in the room. I swear, you could feel the collective groan ripple through the table. Paula, please, my mom said, already exasperated. No. I think it needs to be addressed, Paula insisted, her eyes locking on me. You embarrassed this family with your little stunt. You mocked decades of tradition. I just stared at her, trying to stay calm. I didn't mock anyone. I decorated my house with what makes me happy. You replaced your cousin's milestones with a dog, she snapped. Do you know how that looks? Ashley tried to interject. It was kind of funny. Mom, Paula glared at her. It was disrespectful. It shows how little he cares about this family. That's when I finally snapped. I'd been biting my tongue for so long that the words just came pouring out. You want to talk about respect? I've been showing up to every reunion, every holiday, every photo session for years. And somehow I've never been in a single one of those family photos you're so obsessed with. Not one. Maybe the reason I didn't hang them is because I got tired of pretending I belonged in a family that keeps cropping me out. The room went silent. My mom looked heartbroken. Ashley looked shocked. Brandon just looked uncomfortable. And Paula, she went red. That's not true, she said. But her voice wasn't nearly as confident anymore. It is, I said. I looked through every picture in that folder you sent. You erased me, and now you're mad that I replaced your version of family with mine. She opened her mouth to argue but didn't have anything to say. Megan spoke up next, bless her. Honestly, he's right. I noticed that too. Every photo is of us or our parents, not once of him. That's pretty messed up, Ashley nodded reluctantly. Yeah, that's true. I thought it was weird but didn't want to say anything. Paula tried to deflect, saying something about how not every picture can include everyone. But the damage was done. My mom even quietly said, Paula, he's right. I didn't realize it until he mentioned it, but I looked through them too. He's not in a single one. Paula's face tightened. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and said, I don't have to sit here and be disrespected. And with that, she left. The rest of dinner was weirdly calm after that. Brandon apologized, saying he didn't mean to add fuel with that Facebook post. Ashley admitted she thought the whole thing was hilarious, but felt pressured to take her mom's side. Megan, as always, was the real MVP. She hugged me and said, I'd hang pictures of Milo too. He's way cuter than us. A few days later, I got a text from my mom with a picture attached. It was an old photo of me, maybe 10 or 11, sitting at a family picnic with my cousins. I had ice cream on my shirt and the biggest grin on my face. She said, Found this in Grandma's old albums. You deserve to be on the wall too. I won't lie. I teared up a little. Then something unexpected happened. Megan started a group chat with just the cousins. No parents, No aunts, no uncles, she said. Let's start making our own family folder. One where everyone actually gets included. Ashley was in. Brandon hesitated, but eventually said, "Sure, I'll add some from my phone." So we did. We shared pictures from recent years. Trips, barbecues, random selfies, even ones with Milo. The first picture in the new album was me holding him, with the caption Megan added, "Real family starts here." But the best part? A week later, my mom came by to visit. She brought a box of new frames. She helped me hang a few pictures from the new folder alongside Milo's photos. So now my wall isn't just my dog, it's my people too. The ones who actually see me. As for Paula, she hasn't spoken to me since that dinner, apparently. She told the extended family that I destroyed her family's traditions. But funny enough, I've gotten messages from 2 other cousins, ones who live out of state, saying they saw the drama unfold online and completely understood where I was coming from. One of them even joked, "I might replace my family photos with my cats." You inspired me. It's weird how something so small, just pictures, could open up so many buried feelings. For years I felt invisible. Replacing those photos wasn't about pettiness anymore. It was about reclaiming space in my own life. Now, every time I walk down that hallway and see those frames, half Milo, half new memories, I feel something I didn't before. Belonging, it's not perfect, but it's mine. And if Aunt Paula ever does come back over, well, I've already saved a special frame just for her. It's empty. Final update. How it all came full circle, and what happened with Aunt Paula. It's been about 6 months since the whole Milo photo scandal, and I can honestly say that what started as a petty act of frustration ended up changing the entire dynamic of my family. For better and worse, after that last dinner blow-up, I didn't hear from Aunt Paula for months. She unfriended me on Facebook, stopped inviting me to family gatherings, and even skipped my mom's birthday party, which was a first. My mom was torn up about it, but I told her I didn't want her to be in the middle. I was done trying to force relationships that clearly didn't want me. Meanwhile, the cousin group chat became something amazing. Megan, Ashley, and I started actually talking, not just surface-level updates, but real conversations. We even planned a small weekend trip to the Smoky Mountains with our partners and, of course, Milo. Brandon bailed at the last minute, saying work got in the way, but I think he just didn't want to deal with potential awkwardness. Still, the trip was the first time I felt like we were connecting as equals, not just the forgotten cousin tagging along. We rented a cabin, cooked dinner together, played cards, and hiked one of the easier trails so Milo could keep up. There was one night we sat by the fire, and Ashley admitted something that stuck with me. She said, "You know, I used to think you didn't really like being around the family. I never realized it was because nobody ever made room for you." That hit hard. I told her it wasn't anyone's fault directly. It was just this unspoken pattern. I'd become the quiet one because no one ever noticed when I wasn't loud. But now, it felt like I was finally being seen. When we got back, Megan posted a picture from the trip on Facebook. Me, Ashley, and Milo sitting by the lake, all smiling. The caption said, "Family is who shows up." It didn't take long for Aunt Paula to comment. She wrote, "Interesting that some people think family can be replaced with pets and weekend getaways." For the first time in my life, I didn't let her words get to me. I simply replied, "You're right. Family can't be replaced. But it can be chosen." The comment blew up. Some of the extended relatives liked her comment. Others liked mine. But something unexpected happened after that. Brandon texted me privately. He said, "I think Mom was out of line. I just didn't know how to say it before. You didn't deserve to be treated like that. That message meant a lot." It wasn't a grand apology, but it was enough. I told him no hard feelings, and that I hoped someday we could all hang out again. No drama, no guilt, just people. Then, out of nowhere, Aunt Paula called me. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity won. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "I saw that picture of you and the girls," she said. "It was nice. You all looked happy." I didn't know where she was going with it, so I stayed quiet. She sighed and said, "I went through Grandma's albums last week. You were right. There aren't any photos of you in the family folders. I don't know how that happened, but it shouldn't have." That caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting an apology. Not from her, she continued. "I was stubborn. I thought I was protecting our traditions. But maybe I was just clinging to the past. I didn't realize I was making someone feel like they weren't part of it," I told her. "It's okay. It hurt. But I get it now." We all have blind spots, she said almost jokingly. So, would you consider putting one photo of us humans back up on the wall? I laughed. Only if you let me put one of Milo next to it. She actually laughed too. Deal. That conversation changed everything. A few weeks later, Paula came by my place. First time since the argument. She brought a framed photo of the entire family from years ago. Everyone, including me. She said she found it buried in one of Grandma's old boxes. She handed it to me and said, "This one deserves to be seen." We hung it on the wall together, right next to it. I put a photo of Milo sitting proudly with his paw on my knee. The two pictures side by side felt like the perfect balance of past and present, where I came from, and what I built for myself. Now, family dinners are different, more inclusive. Aunt Paula still has her quirks. She'll always be dramatic, but she's softened. She even asked Megan to bring Milo to the last reunion because he's part of the family now. I nearly choked on my drink when she said that. The Milo wall still exists, but it's evolved. There's still plenty of photos of him, but now there's space for others too. Friends, cousins, even Paula. I didn't do it because I was pressured. I did it because I wanted to. Because now when I look at those pictures, I see love instead of obligation. Sometimes I think about how all of this started with a silly act of defiance. I was hurt and tired of being invisible. But that one small act forced everyone, including me, to face what was broken. The other night my mom came over again. She looked at the wall, smiled, and said, "I think Grandma would have loved this. And I think she would have too. Because it's not just a wall of photos anymore. It's a story. A messy, imperfect, beautiful story of learning what family really means. And right in the middle of it all, framed in gold, is Milo, smiling like the hero he's always been. Stories number 2. My friend of 10 years called me toxic because I won't let her unvaccinated baby around my son. So I 32F have a 5-year-old son? Oliver, he's my whole world. That's not just a cliche. He literally saved me from a really dark period in my life. My pregnancy wasn't easy, and after he was born, we found out he had some immune issues that made him a little more susceptible to infections. Nothing extreme, but it's enough that our pediatrician strongly emphasizes keeping him up to date on vaccinations and avoiding exposure to preventable diseases. Enter my best friend, or I guess former best friend. Jenna, 31F, we met in college. We've been through everything together, breakups, road trips, weddings, you name it. She was my maid of honor, and I was supposed to be hers next spring. We've always joked about our kids growing up together, being cousins by friendship, that kind of thing. When Jenna got pregnant earlier this year, I was genuinely thrilled for her. We spent hours picking baby names and nursery ideas. I even helped her plan her baby shower. She's one of those people who does deep dives into parenting research, Montessori methods, breastfeeding techniques, cloth diapering, all of it. I admired her dedication, even if she sometimes went a little overboard with her natural preferences. But a few weeks ago, during one of our FaceTime calls, she casually mentioned something that made my stomach drop. We were talking about pediatricians, and she said, "Yeah, we're actually not going to do vaccines right away. We want to give his immune system a chance to develop naturally." I thought I misheard. I said, "Wait, what do you mean, not right away?" She shrugged and said, "Maybe when he's older. We're still researching. I've been watching some doctors on YouTube who explain how over-vaccination can mess with the immune system." I felt my face getting hot. I tried to stay calm. I really did. And I said, "Jenna, that's not how vaccines work. Those doctors aren't actual pediatricians. You know Oliver has immune issues, right? You remember how careful we've had to be." She just smiled, all peaceful and condescending, like I was overreacting. "Oh, I know. But that's why we're focusing on building natural immunity. Breast milk, clean food, no toxins. I don't want all those chemicals in my baby," I told her flat out. "If you don't vaccinate your baby, he can't be around Oliver." Her smile disappeared. "Are you serious right now?" "Dead serious," I said. "It's not personal, but I can't risk my kid getting sick." She scoffed and said, "You're being dramatic. Kids have been fine for centuries without vaccines." That was it for me. I told her the conversation was over until she talked to a real doctor. For the next few days, we didn't talk. Then she started texting me these long messages filled with links, articles from sketchy websites, videos of self-proclaimed holistic doctors, even a Facebook group about vaccine awareness. I ignored most of it, until she sent one that said, "I can't believe you'd let Big Pharma scare you into isolating your son." That one pissed me off. I texted back, "I'm not isolating him. I'm protecting him. You do what you want with your kid, but don't expect me to risk mine. She didn't reply for 2 days. Then she finally sent, I guess I know where we stand. It's sad that fear controls your life. I thought we were better than this. That hurt more than I expected. A week later, she came to my house unannounced. I was honestly relieved to see her at first. I missed her. But she wasn't there to make peace. She had this weird self-righteous energy. She sat on my couch and said, I just wanted to talk face to face before I give up on this friendship. I know you're scared, but I think you need to open your mind, I said. I'm open to science, Jenna, not conspiracy theories. She rolled her eyes and said, Science evolves, you know. The medical industry changes its mind all the time. I just want to parent intuitively, I said. Fine. Parent however you want. But don't expect me to expose my son to preventable diseases because you're following your intuition. That's when she snapped. She said, You've become toxic. Everything has to be your way, or you cut people off. You judge anyone who doesn't parent exactly like you, I asked her. Would you let your baby play with an unvaccinated kid if he had a weak immune system? She hesitated, then said, That's different. No, I said. It's not. She grabbed her bag and stormed out. That was 3 weeks ago. She hasn't spoken to me since. Mutual friends are split. Half of them think I'm right to protect my child. The other half think I should be more understanding because Jenna's just doing her best. One of our mutual friends, Tara, told me Jenna's been saying I kicked her out of my life for being a mindful mom. Tara said Jenna cried about how heartless I was, that I'm raising Oliver in fear. I'll admit, that stung. Jenna and I have been through so much. I was there when her dad died. She was there when I had a miscarriage before Oliver. We've shared everything, until this. And I hate that it's come to this line in the sand. But I'm not budging. Last week I ran into her husband, Matt, at Target. He was polite but cold. I asked how Jenna was feeling, and he said, She's hurt. You were supposed to be her friend, not her judge. Then he walked off. I stood there in the frozen aisle, holding a bag of peas, wondering how something like this became our breaking point. It's not like I want to control her choices. I just don't want those choices to endanger my kid, even my husband. Eric said I should stop stressing about it, he told me. You can't save her from bad decisions, just focus on Oliver. He's right, but part of me keeps replaying our friendship in my head. The college dorm talks, the bridesmaid dresses, the late-night phone calls when life sucked, and now, all over something that shouldn't even be controversial. The worst part? I keep thinking about her baby. He's due in a month, and I know she'll be a good mom in so many ways. She's caring and gentle and patient, but she's also stubborn as hell. I wish I could just shake her and say, This isn't the hill to die on. But maybe she thinks the same about me. So now, I'm sitting here, typing this out at 11:30 p.m., wondering if I just lost my best friend forever. I don't feel guilty for protecting my son. I feel guilty for caring so much about someone who thinks I'm the villain. A few days ago, Tara sent me a photo of Jenna's baby shower. Everyone looks so happy, she captioned it. You should have been there, I didn't reply. I just stared at the photo for a long time. It's weird how friendship can survive death. Heartbreak, distance, but not this, not a vaccine. Update. My friend called me toxic because I wouldn't let her unvaccinated baby around my son. Hi everyone. I didn't expect my post to blow up the way it did. I read almost every comment. Thank you to everyone who shared thoughtful advice, even the ones that called me out a little. It's been a few months since I posted, and a lot has happened. So for context, my last post was about my best friend of 10 years, Jenna, who told me she and her husband weren't planning to vaccinate their baby. I told her that if she went through with that, I couldn't let her baby be around my 5-year-old son, Oliver, who has immune sensitivities. Things got heated, and our friendship basically fell apart. Since then, things have gotten complicated. Jenna had her baby boy, his name's Eli, about 2 months ago. I found out through a mutual friend's Instagram story. Not directly from Jenna. That alone hurt more than I'd like to admit. I sent her a text the next day that just said, Congratulations. I hope you're both doing well. She didn't respond. I tried to tell myself that she was probably exhausted, adjusting to newborn life. But after a week went by, I realized it wasn't that. A few weeks later, Tara told me that Jenna read my text but said she wasn't ready to talk to me yet. That stung, but I didn't push. I was genuinely happy for her, I really was. I even put together a small care package, baby lotion, some onesies, and a hand-knit blanket my mom made. But I didn't send it. It's still sitting in my closet because I didn't want to make things worse. Fast forward to about 3 weeks ago. Oliver's preschool sent out a notice that a classmate had tested positive for whooping cough. My stomach dropped immediately. Even though Oliver is vaccinated, I still panic about stuff like that because of his immune system. Luckily, he didn't get sick, but it triggered a lot of anxiety for me. That same week, I ran into Jenna's husband, Matt. Again, this time at the grocery store. He was alone, baby-free, grabbing formula and diapers. I wasn't sure if I should say hi, but he spotted me first. He looked tired. Not just new dad tired, but emotionally drained. He sighed and said, "Hey, look, I know things are weird between you and Jenna, but just so you know, she had a tough delivery. She's been kind of isolating herself." I told him I was sorry to hear that and asked how the baby was doing. He smiled a little and said, "He's good, healthy so far." Then, almost as an afterthought, he said quietly, "We're rethinking some things." I didn't ask what he meant, but it stuck in my head for days. About a week after that, I finally got a text from Jenna. It said, "Hey, I know it's been a while. I've been meaning to reach out, but everything's been overwhelming. I saw your text after Eli was born, thank you. I just needed space." I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't know how to respond. Eventually I wrote back, "It's okay, I understand. I'm glad you and Eli are healthy. How are you feeling?" She replied almost immediately, "Better, honestly. The first few weeks were rough. I had a minor infection after delivery, and Eli caught a cold right after we came home. It scared me more than I expected. I'm realizing how fragile babies are." I didn't say it out loud, but I thought, yeah, that's why vaccines exist. We ended up texting on and off for the next few days. Nothing deep. Mostly small talk about sleep schedules, diaper blowouts, and how hard breastfeeding really is. It felt almost normal, like we were inching back toward each other. Then, one night, she texted me again. A longer message this time. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said months ago. About protecting Oliver. I was angry back then, but I get it now. I took Eli to the pediatrician last week for a checkup. The doctor talked to us about vaccinations. I didn't commit yet, but we're considering starting them gradually." I actually cried reading that. Not out of smugness, I promise, but out of sheer relief. I told her how proud I was that she was open to learning more. She said she'd watched her newborn struggle with something as minor as a cold, and it scared her. She said she couldn't imagine him facing something worse because she wanted to trust nature. That line hit me hard. We kept talking for hours that night. She admitted that a lot of her anti-vaccine stuff came from fear. Fear of side effects, fear of losing control, fear of being a bad mom if she didn't do things perfectly. She said, "The internet made it sound like vaccines were the enemy. But I think I just needed to feel like I had power in a world that feels unpredictable." I told her that made total sense. That parenting can make even smart people desperate for control. We both cried a little. It was messy but honest. It's not like everything magically fixed itself overnight. There's still tension. We haven't met up in person yet. I'm still cautious about having Oliver around Eli until he's fully vaccinated. And Jenna understands that, but the tone between us has completely shifted. She's been sending me pictures of Eli, him smiling, sleeping, bundled up in tiny hats. And I send her pictures of Oliver playing with his Legos. Last week she even said, "When Eli gets his first round of shots, maybe we can finally have that play date we always dreamed about." I told her I'd love that. I've thought a lot about this whole thing. Not just about vaccines, but about friendship and boundaries. When I first posted, I was so focused on feeling right. I wanted people to validate that I wasn't being cruel or judgmental. And while I still believe I did the right thing by protecting my son, I've realized that sometimes being right isn't enough. You can be right and still lose someone. You can be justified and still lonely. I didn't have to yell at Jenna back then, even though she was being reckless. I could have approached it with more empathy. She told me later that my tone made her feel cornered and defensive. That doesn't excuse her choices, but it helped me understand why she doubled down so hard. That said, I don't regret my boundary. I'd set it again in a heartbeat. But I've learned that boundaries and compassion don't have to be opposites. Small, full-circle moment yesterday. Jenna texted me a photo of Eli at his 2-month appointment, holding a little sticker that said, "I was brave today," she captioned it. "First round done, I cried more than he did. I just sat there smiling like an idiot, because it felt like the friendship I thought I'd lost was finally finding its way back. We still have a lot to rebuild: trust, time, and understanding. but I think we're getting there. And when she texted later, maybe we should get the boys matching Halloween costumes next year. I didn't even hesitate before typing, "Deal." I don't know if anyone will even see this update, but I wanted to share it in case someone else is going through something similar, where a friend's choices clash with your values, and you feel torn between love and safety. Sometimes people need time and a little grace to come around, and sometimes they actually do. It's been a year since I wrote my original post about my friend calling me toxic for not letting her unvaccinated baby around my son. I honestly didn't think I'd ever come back with an update, but life has a way of softening edges you didn't think could ever smooth out. A year ago I was angry, hurt, heartbroken, really. Losing Jenna felt like losing a piece of my own history. We'd been friends for a decade, college roommates, bridesmaids at each other's weddings, late-night confessions through heartbreaks and job losses, and yet, the friendship that survived everything fell apart over one decision: vaccines. After my last post, we texted a little here and there, cautiously, like people testing the temperature of cold water. I knew she'd had her baby, a boy named Eli, but I didn't meet him right away. I didn't even know if I ever would. She said she needed space, and I tried to respect that. Then, a few months later, she told me she was thinking about vaccinating after all. That one message, that tiny, hesitant line, changed everything. It was the first real bridge between us in months. We didn't fix things overnight, but that message cracked the door open. And little by little, we started finding our way back. Eli just turned 1 last week, and for the first time, our sons finally met. Oliver is 6 now, healthy and growing like a weed. And he was so excited to meet baby Eli. He's been asking about him since the day I told him Jenna had a baby. When we walked into her house, I felt my heart in my throat. I didn't know what to expect. She stood there, holding Eli, smiling nervously. I swear for a second we both froze, like we weren't sure how to exist in the same space again. Then I said, "He's perfect," and she teared up. She said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." We both just started crying, right there in her living room, while our kids stared at us like we were weird. After that, everything felt lighter. The kind of tension that used to fill every silence between us was gone. We sat on her couch, talked about everything and nothing. She told me she felt ashamed for how defensive she'd been. She said she'd been terrified when Eli got sick as a newborn, even with something as small as a cold. And that's when she realized how vulnerable babies really are. She admitted she'd been wrong, and I didn't rub it in. I just told her I understood. Because I did. Fear does strange things to people. It makes smart, loving people desperate for control. Since then, we've been slowly rebuilding. There's been a lot of coffee, long stroller walks, texts at midnight about sleep regressions and tantrums. We don't talk about vaccines anymore because we don't need to. She got Eli fully caught up, and she doesn't make a big deal about it. She just quietly did the right thing. We're not the same friends we were before all this, but maybe that's a good thing. Back then, our friendship was built on similarity. Now it's built on respect. She still loves her natural parenting stuff. Homemade purees, wooden toys, organic everything. And I'm still the if Target sells it, I'm good kind of mom, but we laugh about it now. We've both learned to stop trying to convert each other. A few weeks ago, she said something that stuck with me. I used to think boundaries meant rejection. Now I see they can be an invitation to grow up. She's right. When I told her that her baby couldn't be around mine if he wasn't vaccinated, I wasn't rejecting her, I was protecting my kid, but I didn't realize at the time that I was also giving her a chance to think, to learn, to make a choice. I just didn't know if she ever would. When we finally went to Eli's first birthday party, it felt like the final page of a really painful chapter. It was small and chaotic, full of cupcakes and balloons and laughing babies. At one point, Jenna handed me a slice of cake and said, "You know, this party wouldn't have happened if you hadn't yelled at me last year." I laughed and said, "I didn't yell." She gave me that look, the one that says, "You totally did," and said, "You text yelled, that counts." Then she laughed, and for the first time in a long time, I saw my old friend completely. No resentment, no defensiveness, just gratitude, she told me. "I mean it. You standing your ground made me think harder than anyone else could have. So thank you." I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her. Sometimes words aren't needed. Watching Oliver and Eli play together now feels like a reward I didn't know I'd earned. They chase each other around, giggling, sharing toys and snacks. Oliver calls him Little E. Every time I see them together, it hits me. All the stress, the heartbreak, the distance, it was worth it. Because now they get to have the kind of friendship we dreamed they'd have, and it's built on something real. I used to think protecting my son meant building walls. Now I realize it means building bridges too. Ones that only stand if you're brave enough to hold the line and leave space for love to return. So yeah, we made it. And for anyone out there facing something similar, a friend, a family member, anyone you love making choices that scare you, don't let fear turn you cold. Boundaries aren't the end of love sometimes. They're the start of something truer. And if you're lucky one day, you'll find yourself at a little kid's birthday party, holding a slice of cake, laughing with the friend you once thought you'd lost forever. Realizing that sometimes, love just needed time to come back home. Stories number 3. My boyfriend got furious when I used our savings for something he thinks is useless. I never thought something as small as this would turn into a full-blown argument. But here we are. I'm 28, my boyfriend is 30, and we've been living together for about 2 years. We opened a joint savings account last year to start saving for a house. It wasn't a huge amount yet, but it was our shared pride. We'd both agreed that the money would go toward things that matter. Mostly our future home, maybe a vacation and emergency expenses. But we never really wrote down what counts as okay or not okay to spend it on. That's where things got messy a few weeks ago. I bought something I've wanted for years. A high-end pottery wheel. It cost about $200. I know that's not pocket change, but I've been obsessed with ceramics since college. I used to sell my pieces at local fairs before life got too busy. Lately, I've been feeling burned out at my job in HR, and getting back into pottery felt like a way to breathe again. The thing is, I didn't tell my boyfriend before I bought it. I just did it. I told myself it's our money. But I'm one of the contributors too. I make slightly more than he does, and I've been the one depositing more into that account. So in my head, it didn't seem like such a big deal. When the delivery came, he was home. The look on his face said everything. He didn't yell at first, just stood there with this confused, almost betrayed look. Then he asked, "You spent from our house fund? For that?" I tried explaining how much pottery meant to me, how I could eventually sell my pieces again, how it might even become a small side hustle. But he cut me off saying, "You took money from something we both worked for, and bought a toy." That word, toy, stuck with me. We argued for hours. He said I was selfish, impulsive, and that I'd broken his trust. I told him it was unfair to call it our money only when he doesn't agree with how I use it. He said that's exactly why joint accounts don't work when one person acts without consulting the other. That night, he slept on the couch. Since then, things have been tense. He still talks to me, but it's distant. Short replies, no warmth. He even suggested splitting the joint account into separate ones until he feels he can trust me again. That one hurt. It's not like I bought something random or wasteful. I've already used the wheel multiple times, and I feel so much calmer when I work on it. It genuinely helps with my anxiety. I even made a few mugs and bowls that I plan to sell on Etsy once I have a few more pieces, but I get where he's coming from too. If he had spent $200 from our savings on, say, a gaming setup without asking me, I probably would have been upset. The difference, though, is I would have at least listened before accusing him of betrayal. I keep going back and forth on whether I really messed up, or if he's overreacting. I've apologized for not telling him, but he says the apology doesn't fix what's already been done. He told me, "You made a unilateral decision with money that isn't just yours," I said. "It's partly mine, though." He didn't respond. The weirdest part is how cold he's been since it's not even about the money anymore. It's the way he's treating me like I broke some sacred rule. We've always been good at communicating, or at least I thought we were, but now it feels like there's this wall between us. I tried to lighten things up by suggesting we work on a budget or make clear rules for future spending, but he brushed it off. He said it's not about the rules, it's about the principle, that it's hard to save when one person makes decisions that undermine the goal. I can't tell if this is just a fight we'll move past, or if it's exposing something deeper about how we see money and priorities. I keep thinking about what this means long term. If we can't agree on something like this, how are we going to handle a mortgage, or kids, or emergencies? For now, I've stopped using the pottery wheel when he's around. Not because I'm ashamed of it, but because I can tell it bothers him just to see it. He won't say it, but I can feel it. I love him. I really do. But I also love having something that's just mine. Something that makes me happy beyond the relationship. I don't think that's wrong. Still, part of me wonders if maybe I should have just waited, talked to him first, and avoided all this tension. I don't know if that would have changed how he feels, though. maybe he still would have said no. And I'd be sitting here feeling resentful for giving up something that matters to me. So here I am, sitting next to a pottery wheel that's supposed to bring me peace, while the person I love barely looks at me. I'm not sure which one of us is actually in the wrong anymore. Update. It's been a few weeks since the pottery wheel incident, and things have shifted, but not in the way I hoped. For a while it felt like my boyfriend, Ryan, and I were living as roommates. We'd talk about chores, bills, and work, but nothing deeper. The warmth between us just evaporated every time I tried to bridge the gap. It turned into another quiet argument that went nowhere. One night, I asked if we could sit down and talk properly. Not to rehash the fight, but to figure out what was really happening. He agreed, but I could tell he was bracing himself. Like he already knew what I was going to say. I told him I missed us. I said I was sorry again for spending the money without telling him. But I also said I felt hurt by how he'd been treating me. I told him it felt like he was punishing me instead of trying to fix things together. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he told me he'd been talking to his sister about it, and she'd said something that stuck with him. If someone uses shared money without asking, it's not just a financial mistake, it's a trust issue. That stung. But I tried to stay calm. I said, okay, but if we're talking about trust, doesn't it go both ways? Don't you trust me to care about our future? He looked at me for a long time and said, I used to. That broke something in me. I think that's when I realized it wasn't just about the money anymore. He felt like I made a decision that excluded him, and I felt like he was using the money as an excuse to control what I can and can't do. We went back and forth for hours. I told him I wanted to make it right, that I'd replenish the savings from my next few paychecks. He said it's not about refilling the account. It's about respect. He told me, you don't buy something that big without checking in. It's not about permission, it's about partnership. That part hit me hard because I actually agree. I just wish he could see that I wasn't being reckless or selfish. I was trying to bring some joy back into my life. For context, I've been dealing with a lot of stress at work lately. The pottery thing wasn't random. It was me trying to cope. I told him that too. And for the first time, he actually softened a little. He said he didn't know I felt that unhappy, that he thought I was just bored. After that, we talked more honestly than we had in weeks. We admitted we both had messed up. Me for spending the money without talking. Him for shutting me out emotionally. We decided to make new rules for the savings. Anything over $500, we have to talk about first. That felt fair. But even after that talk, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. The trust part, like he said, didn't magically fix itself. I could feel him holding back from me. He wasn't affectionate like before. And whenever I mentioned the pottery wheel or used it, he'd find an excuse to leave the room. Then something unexpected happened. I posted some of my pottery pieces online. Nothing big, just a few bowls and mugs. Within a week I sold 2. It wasn't much, but it felt like validation, like maybe it wasn't such a stupid purchase after all. When I told Ryan, I thought he'd be happy for me. He just said, that's good, and went back to scrolling on his phone. No smile, no excitement, nothing. Later that night, he admitted he still didn't like how I handled things. He said seeing me make money from it doesn't erase how it happened. I get that, but I couldn't help feeling frustrated. I told him, you can't keep punishing me for one decision. I've done everything to make it right, he said. I'm not punishing you. I'm just being honest about how I feel. That's the thing. He's not mean. He's not yelling. But it's like he's emotionally checked out. I started noticing small things. He stays late at work, doesn't reach for me when we're on the couch, and keeps his phone closer than usual. I don't think he's cheating, but I do think he's distancing himself. We used to talk about marriage and kids, but lately, when I bring up the future, he just says, let's focus on the present. The present doesn't feel great, though. I tried inviting him to a pottery fair last weekend to show him what I love about it, thinking maybe if he saw how much it means to me, he'd understand. He said he had errands. He didn't even ask how it went. So now I'm sitting here wondering if this is the start of the end. I know relationships go through ups and downs, but this feels like something deeper, like a crack that's not going to close easily. The irony is, I bought that pottery wheel because I wanted something peaceful, something grounding. Instead, it's become the symbol of everything that's broken between us. Still, I can't bring myself to regret it completely. Every time I sit down and shape the clay, I feel like I'm taking back a little piece of myself. I think that's what's keeping me sane right now. Ryan and I agreed to go to couples therapy next week. He said he's willing to try, but I can tell he's doing it more out of obligation than excitement. I'll take what I can get, though. I love him. But I'm starting to realize that love might not be enough if we can't respect each other's way of finding happiness. Final update. It's been a little over 2 months since my last update, and I've been thinking about how much has changed and how much hasn't. Ryan and I did go to therapy like we said we would. At first it was awkward as hell. Neither of us knew how to talk without sounding defensive. The therapist, a woman named Laura, asked us to describe what partnership meant to each of us. Ryan said it meant trust and shared goals. I said it meant support and understanding. It sounds like those things should overlap. But sitting there, I realized they didn't for us. When we unpacked the pottery wheel situation, Laura didn't take sides. She said something that stuck with me. You both wanted the same thing. A sense of control over your lives. You just went about it differently. That line hit me harder than I expected. Ryan wanted control over our financial future. I wanted control over my own happiness. Neither of us communicated that clearly, so it turned into resentment. The sessions helped us talk again, but they also made me see things I'd ignored for a long time. Ryan's not a bad guy, but he's rigid. Everything has to be by the book. Planned, logical, he doesn't take risks. I, on the other hand, have always followed my gut. I like stability, but not at the cost of joy. The pottery wheel wasn't our real problem. It was the symbol of how different we are. Over time, I noticed something. Every time I brought up future plans, Ryan would talk about we in practical terms, but never in emotional ones. We should save more. We should plan ahead. But never we should travel. Or we should do something fun together. It felt like we were building a life plan. Not a life. We kept going to therapy for a month. But one night after a session, I asked him point blank if he still saw a future with me. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I'm not sure anymore." That was it. No yelling, no dramatic fight, just quiet honesty. I didn't cry right then. But later that night, when I was alone, it hit me hard. I'd been trying so hard to fix things that I hadn't noticed how checked out he already was. A week later, he suggested we take a break. I think he thought it would soften the blow. But I knew what it really meant. I told him I wasn't interested in limbo. Either we work on this or we don't. He said he didn't think he could move past the resentment, and he didn't want to drag things out, so we ended it. It was quiet, almost too calm. We split our things, closed the joint account, and I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment not far from my office. I took the pottery wheel with me, of course. It felt weirdly symbolic. Me carrying the one thing that caused all this, but also the one thing that still gives me peace. The first few weeks were rough. I kept expecting to hear his keys in the door, his voice in the kitchen, his laugh from the other room. I missed the routines more than I missed the relationship, which told me a lot about what it had turned into. Now, 2 months later, I feel okay, maybe even good. I've been throwing myself into pottery more than ever. I've sold enough pieces to cover almost half the cost of the wheel. I even got invited to show my work at a small art fair downtown next month. Sometimes I still think about him. I wonder if he ever regrets how it ended, or if he's relieved. I think about how we started. 2 people who thought they were on the same page, only to realize we were reading different books entirely. The last time we talked was a short text exchange about some mail that came to his place. It was polite, detached. He ended it with, "I hope you're doing well," I told him. I am. And for the first time it was true. I'm learning that it's okay to outgrow people, even ones you love. It doesn't mean they were bad or you were wrong. It just means you needed different things. That pottery wheel that once felt like the cause of our downfall now feels like a quiet reminder that sometimes choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you honest. If I could go back, I'd still buy it. But this time, I'd have the conversation first, not to ask for permission, but to make sure we were on the same side before I took that step. Because love, I've learned, isn't just about sharing a life. It's about sharing understanding. And once that's gone, the rest starts to crumble, no matter how much you want to hold it together. Now, when I sit at my wheel, I think about everything I shaped from that one impulsive decision. It cost me a relationship, but it gave me something else. Clarity, independence, and peace. Maybe that's worth every dollar I spent. Stories number 4. My boyfriend thinks I'm high maintenance for wanting a towel after his showers. I never thought something as small as a towel could make me question my relationship. But here we are. I've been dating my boyfriend, Ryan, for about a year now. We met through mutual friends. He's one of those laid-back, go-with-the-flow kind of guys. At first, I loved that about him. He's charming, funny, not too serious about life, and he somehow manages to stay calm no matter what happens. But lately, I've started realizing that his version of laid back might just mean lazy and inconsiderate. I moved into his apartment 3 months ago. It wasn't planned super far in advance, but my lease was ending, and he'd been hinting about us living together. We're both 28, so it felt like the next natural step. The first couple of weeks were fine, fun even. We'd cook together, binge-watch shows, and laugh about the quirks of sharing a space. But then little things started to pile up. One of those little things is the bathroom situation. Ryan has this habit of taking long, steamy showers and using every single towel in the bathroom. I'm not exaggerating. He'll grab one for his body, one for his hair, sometimes even one to lay on the floor so he doesn't slip. By the time he's done, the towel rack looks like a battlefield. Everything's damp, tossed around and unusable. The problem is, he always showers right before me, every single time. So I'll walk into the bathroom ready for my turn, only to realize all the towels are either soaked or sitting in a wet pile on the floor. The first time it happened, I laughed it off and yelled from the bathroom, "Hey, could you bring me a towel?" He did, after like 5 minutes, and made a joke about me sounding like a princess. It didn't feel like a big deal then, but it kept happening, every morning, same thing, every night, same thing. Sometimes I'd ask for a towel before he even started showering, thinking that would solve it. Nope, he'd forget, use them all, and leave me stuck again. One morning, I came out dripping wet, wrapped in a tiny hand towel like some kind of budget toga. And he laughed. "You're so dramatic," he said. That's when I started getting annoyed. I told him, "It's not dramatic to expect a dry towel after my shower. That's just basic consideration." He rolled his eyes and said, "God, you're so high maintenance. You act like I'm your butler or something." I was floored. "Ryan, I'm literally just asking you not to use all the towels, or to grab me one if you do. That's not high maintenance, that's normal." He just shrugged and said, "You're making a big deal out of nothing. You could just grab one before I shower if it bothers you so much. That would be fine. Except the towel closet is in the bathroom. So if he's already showering, I can't exactly walk in there without getting drenched or interrupting him." I tried reasoning with him again. I told him we could buy more towels, or maybe set up a small rack in the hallway, but he didn't want that either. "It's fine the way it is," he said. "You're just overthinking it." So I did what any reasonable person would do. I bought my own towels and kept them in my closet. Bright pink ones, so there's no mistaking whose they are. The first morning I used one, Ryan raised an eyebrow. "What's with the Barbie towels?" "They're mine," I said. "So you can stop using them all." He actually got offended. "You don't trust me with towels now?" "Trust isn't the issue," I told him. "It's about respect. I just want to have one that's clean and dry when I need it." He sighed, muttered something about me making everything a competition, and walked off. Things didn't get better after that. In fact, they got weirder. He started deliberately using my towels. I'd go to grab one from my closet, and it would be gone, or hanging damp on the bathroom door. When I called him out, he grinned and said, "What?" They were there. Towels are towels. That's when I lost my patience. "Ryan, you're acting like a child," I said. "This isn't about towels anymore. It's about the fact that you don't care how your actions affect me." He laughed again. "You're reading way too much into it." "It's just a towel, babe," I snapped back. "Yeah, and locking the door when you leave is just a lock. Doing dishes is just a plate. And cleaning the toilet is just a chore. It's not about the object, it's about effort. You make me feel like expecting basic decency makes me demanding." He didn't like that. He told me I was starting fights for attention. We didn't talk for the rest of the night. The next morning, I went to take a shower before work. All the towels were gone again. Not a single one in the bathroom. Not even the ones I'd washed the day before. I checked the dryer, empty. Then I opened his gym bag. My towels were inside, used, that was it. I took my clothes, my pink towels, and my dignity, and I left. I went to stay at my friend Madison's apartment for a few days while I cooled off. When Ryan realized I was gone, he texted me, "So you're really leaving me over some towels?" I didn't respond right away. I thought about it for a long time. Then I finally wrote back, "No. I'm leaving because I've been trying to explain something simple for months, and you keep proving you don't care enough to listen." He didn't reply. Madison told me I did the right thing, that it's never really about the towels. It's about how someone treats you when they know they can get away with not trying. I used to think love was about compromise, But I'm starting to realize that compromise only works when both people actually value the other's comfort. It's been 2 weeks now. Ryan's texted a couple of times, mostly guilt-tripping ones like, "Hope you and your princess towels are happy." I ignore them. I've got peace now. Clean towels. And a bathroom that doesn't feel like a swamp. The funniest part? I realized how symbolic it all was. He'd use everything up, leave me with nothing, and then act like I was crazy for asking for something of my own. That's exactly how the rest of our relationship felt too. Last night, as I was folding laundry, I caught myself smiling at my little stack of pink towels. They're soft, clean, and smell like lavender. I know it sounds silly, but they remind me that it's okay to ask for basic respect, and to walk away when someone calls that high maintenance. Because if expecting a towel makes me difficult, then I'll wear that label proudly. At least I'll be dry, comfortable, and free. Update. What happened after I left and the towel war finally ended, so a lot has happened since I walked out of Ryan's apartment with my stack of pink towels. Honestly, I didn't expect to feel this relieved. The first few nights at my friend Madison's place felt weird. I kept expecting a text from him saying something like, "Let's talk," or "I miss you." Instead, what I got were passive-aggressive one-liners like, "You always have to make everything dramatic," and "Hope your towels keep you warm at night." I ignored him. Madison told me to block him, but I wasn't ready yet. I guess part of me still wanted to see if he'd eventually understand what the problem really was. Spoiler, he didn't. About a week after I left, Ryan called me out of the blue. His tone was fake casual, like he was pretending everything was fine. "Hey," he said, "just wanted to check if you're done being mad yet." I almost laughed. "Mad? I'm not mad, Ryan, I'm just done," he scoffed. "Over towels?" That word again. Like it was some magical spell he could use to erase the months of frustration behind it, I told him. "You keep saying it's about towels because you don't want to admit it's about respect," he replied. "You're overanalyzing everything. You're always like this. You twist small things into huge issues." At that point, I realized there was no winning. He wasn't going to listen, so I hung up. Later that night, Madison and I opened a bottle of wine, and I started telling her all the other little things that had been bothering me. Things I hadn't even realized were part of a bigger pattern, like how he'd leave the trash until it overflowed, or how he'd eat the last of something I bought and laugh when I mentioned it. How every argument somehow ended with me apologizing, even when I had nothing to apologize for. Madison looked at me and said, "Girl, that's not laid back. That's weaponized laziness." That phrase stuck with me, because it was exactly that. Ryan hid behind his chill attitude so he never had to put in effort. And whenever I tried to hold him accountable, he'd make me feel like I was uptight or controlling. 2 weeks after I left, I went back to his apartment to grab the last of my things. Mostly a few books. A blanket and some kitchen stuff. I texted him beforehand, asking if he could be gone while I picked up my stuff. He said sure. But when I got there, of course he was home, sitting on the couch, acting like I'd come back to apologize. He smirked when I walked in and said, "So, did your friend finally get tired of your towel obsession?" I ignored the jab and went straight to packing. Milo, his dog, came running over to me, tail wagging. I'd missed that dog more than I'd missed Ryan. I knelt down to pet him, and Ryan said, "You know, you could have just learned to live with small stuff. Relationships are about compromise." I stopped packing and looked at him. "Compromise is when both people meet in the middle." "You didn't move an inch, Ryan," he rolled his eyes. "You're making me out to be some villain. You left because of a towel, and now you're turning it into some big moral lesson." "Because it is a lesson," I said. "You don't get to call someone high maintenance just because they have boundaries." He didn't reply to that, just shrugged and said, "Whatever helps you sleep at night." I finished packing in silence. As I was leaving, I noticed something in the bathroom. He'd hung up one of my pink towels. It was still damp. I don't know if it was a message, a dig, or just laziness. Probably all three. I didn't say anything. I just took it off the rack, folded it, and left. That was the last time I saw him, a few weeks later. I got a text from his sister, Lily. She and I had met a few times when we were dating. She said, "Hey, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how he treated you. I told him off after he bragged about you being crazy over towels. He doesn't get it, but I do." Apparently, Ryan had been telling people the breakup was my fault because I was too demanding. His sister said she called him out and told him that expecting someone to leave a towel, or do anything considerate, wasn't demanding. It was adult behavior. That meant more to me than I can explain. Since then, I've been focusing on rebuilding my own routines. I moved into a small studio apartment closer to work, decorated exactly the way I want. Plants, candles, soft rugs, and yes, a perfectly stocked linen closet. Madison helped me paint the walls and said, "You can finally shower in peace now." She was right. The first morning in my new place, I took a long, hot shower. No stress, no rush. When I stepped out, there was a fresh, fluffy towel waiting right where I left it. It sounds simple, but it hit me how peaceful that moment felt. I didn't have to argue for comfort. I didn't have to beg someone to care. About a month later, I ran into Ryan at a grocery store. He looked surprised to see me. He tried small talk, asked how I was doing. I kept it polite but short. Then he said, "You know, I still think you overreacted." I smiled and said, "Maybe, but at least now I have clean towels." He didn't have a comeback for that. That was the closure I didn't know I needed sometimes. People reveal who they are in the smallest ways, like leaving no towels for you after their shower. It's never really about the towels. It's about the message behind it. My comfort matters more than yours. Now, I've made myself a new rule in dating. If someone laughs when you ask for something basic, that's not someone to build a life with. It's been 4 months since the breakup, and honestly, I've never felt lighter. I've started seeing someone new. Eli, a friend of Madison's. He's thoughtful, kind. And the first time I stayed over, he had a stack of fresh towels waiting for me in the bathroom. I almost cried when I told him why. He just smiled and said, "That's not high maintenance. That's just being human." That's when I realized I wasn't asking for too much. I was just asking the wrong person. Final update: the last conversation, the lesson, and where life took me after. It's been about 9 months since I walked out of Ryan's apartment with my pink towels and my sanity. And I can honestly say that leaving him was one of the best decisions I've ever made. It didn't feel that way right away, though. For the first few months, there were moments where I second-guessed myself, wondering if maybe I had made too big a deal out of a small thing. But every time I replayed it in my head, I remembered how small and unheard I felt, standing there dripping wet, begging for a little respect. Healing is weird like that. It's not just getting over a person. It's unlearning the way they made you feel about yourself. After my last update, life moved forward quietly. I settled into my little studio, made friends with my neighbors, started taking morning walks before work, and got into this habit of lighting a candle after every shower. It's my small ritual now. Clean towel, soft music, lavender candle, peace. It's a reminder that the bare minimum isn't something you should have to fight for. Ryan didn't reach out again after that grocery store run-in. I thought that was the end of it, until last month. Out of nowhere, I got a text from an unknown number that said, "Hey, it's Ryan." I wanted to say I get it now. I stared at it for a while before replying. "Get what?" He said, "The towel thing. I started dating someone new, and she called me out for doing the same stuff." I realized how annoying it is when someone acts like the little things don't matter. I'm sorry, I didn't expect to feel emotional about that, but I did. Not because I wanted him back. God, no. But because hearing him finally understand meant I wasn't crazy all along. I just replied, "I appreciate that. I hope you treat her better." He wrote, "I'm trying to." That was the last thing either of us said. I didn't block him. I didn't need to. That conversation felt like closing a book I'd already finished. Meanwhile, things with Eli, the guy I mentioned before, have been going really well. He's the kind of person who listens, really listens, even to things that seem trivial. One night, I told him the whole story about Ryan, from the towel fiasco to the pink towel rebellion. He didn't laugh or make jokes, he just said, "It's crazy how people think basic respect is optional until they lose someone over it." That night, he surprised me by buying a matching set of towels for his place. Half white, half pink. "Now you'll never run out," he said. It was such a small gesture, but I teared up. Because for once, someone didn't make me feel like asking for comfort made me high maintenance. Fast forward a few weeks, and I ended up seeing Ryan one last time. By accident. It was at a mutual friend's birthday party. I didn't even know he'd be there until I walked in. I froze for a second, but Eli was with me, and his hand found mine. That tiny gesture grounded me. Ryan saw me, smiled awkwardly, and raised his glass. I smiled back, polite but distant. He came over at one point and said, "You look happy." "I am," I said. He nodded. "Good. You deserve it," then he added, almost jokingly. "Bet you've got a lifetime supply of towels now." I laughed. "Yeah, and a lifetime supply of peace too." We both laughed. And that was it. No tension, no drama, just closure. Later that night, when I got home, I thought about how something as mundane as a towel became a symbol of everything that was wrong, and everything I learned to demand for myself. It wasn't about being high maintenance. It was about not settling for crumbs when you're giving someone a feast. Since then, I've started writing again, journaling. Mostly a few weeks ago, I even wrote an essay about the towel lesson for a small lifestyle blog. It went viral. Hundreds of comments from women and a few men saying they'd been through similar situations, being called too much for wanting kindness. Cleanliness, consistency, one woman wrote. It's never about the towel. It's about whether someone leaves space for you in the small moments. That comment hit me hard because that's exactly what it was. Ryan never left space for me. Not in the bathroom. Not in the relationship Eli does. And that's what I wish more people understood. Love isn't shown through grand gestures. It's shown through the everyday acts of consideration that say, I see you, I care. Now when I look at my bathroom, I smile. There's a neat stack of towels, pink, white, and one embroidered with my initials that Eli surprised me with on my birthday. I light my lavender candle, step out of the shower, and wrap myself in warmth that I didn't have to ask for. It's funny how something so small became the line between who I used to be and who I am now. If you're reading this and someone's making you feel like your needs are too much, whether it's about towels, texts, attention, or effort, please remember, you're not too much, they're just giving too little. And sometimes, walking away from someone who calls you high maintenance is the first step to finding someone who calls you worth it. Stories number 5. My wife keeps stealing my food, so I videotaped her eating all my fries to make a point. Okay, before anyone jumps to conclusions, I know this sounds petty, it does, but please, hear me out because it wasn't about the fries. It was about what the fries represented. I'm 35, my wife Lindsay is 33. We've been married for almost 6 years. We're that couple everyone calls chill. We rarely fight. We both have decent jobs. We make each other laugh. And we've been through a lot together. But there's been this one ongoing, stupid, never-ending issue that has slowly started to drive me crazy. She eats my food constantly, not like, oh, can I have a bite? Kind of thing. I mean, she'll order her own meal, pick at it, then devour half of mine. If I grab a snack, she appears out of nowhere and just takes some. No question, no hesitation, just reaches in. It started small when we were dating. We'd go out for burgers and she'd say, I don't want fries, I'll just have a few of yours. I didn't think anything of it. Everyone's done that, but a few turned into half my fries every single time. At first I'd joke about it. You sure you don't want your own? And she'd laugh, no, I like yours better. Cute, right? But 6 years later, it's not cute anymore. I've tried telling her politely that it bothers me. She laughs it off. I've ordered extra fries, thinking it'll solve the problem. She just eats more. I've offered to share from the start. She still takes more than she said she would. I've even started eating faster, like some kind of survival strategy. But she'll just say, why are you eating so fast? Relax, it's gotten to the point where I feel weirdly anxious eating around her. A few weeks ago, we went to this diner we both love. I ordered a cheeseburger and fries. She said she didn't want fries, just a salad. Fine. I even offered again. Are you sure? You can get your own. She said no. The food comes, we're talking, laughing, normal dinner stuff. Then, like clockwork, her fork reaches over. She takes a fry, then another, then another. I said, half joking, you're doing it again. And she goes, what? I'm just having a few. I swear she ate half the fries off my plate before I finished my burger. I was trying to stay calm, but inside I was fuming. It's not the fries, it's the principle. It's that I say, please don't, and she still does it. On the drive home, I told her, it's not about the food, Lindsay. It's about you ignoring something I've told you upsets me. She rolled her eyes and said, you're making such a big deal out of nothing. That was the moment I realized she really didn't get it. So, I decided to show her, not by yelling or starting another argument, but by proving my point. The next week I picked up food to go from that same diner. She wanted a turkey wrap and I got my usual burger and fries. But this time, I set up my phone on the counter and hit record before I brought the food into the living room. I didn't tell her I was recording. I sat down, handed her the wrap, and put my fries next to my burger within 30 seconds. She reached over. I said, hey, remember how I said I wanted all my fries this time? She laughed and said, you always say that. Then she kept eating them. I let it happen. I didn't say another word. Later that night, when she went to take a shower, I watched the video. It was absurd. You could literally see me telling her, "Please don't," and her laughing and grabbing fry after fry like it was some kind of game. The next morning, I told her I wanted to show her something. I played the video. At first she laughed and said, "Oh my God, are you seriously recording me?" But then, as it went on, her smile faded. She saw how I looked, frustrated, silent, trying to keep my cool. She saw how she brushed me off every time I said stop. When it ended, I said, "That's what it feels like every single time." She got quiet. Then she got mad. She said, "I can't believe you filmed me like that." "That's invasive," I said. "It wasn't about invading your privacy, Lindsay. It was about showing you what I've been trying to say for years." She said I was being dramatic, that it's just fries, that I made her look bad on purpose. I said, "I didn't make you look bad. You made you look bad." I just pressed record. She stormed out of the room. We didn't talk for 2 days. When she finally did talk to me, it wasn't about the fries. It was about how humiliated she felt. I apologized if the video embarrassed her, but I said, "You only feel humiliated because you're seeing how dismissive you've been." She didn't like hearing that either. We went through this weird cold phase for about a week. We'd talk, but everything felt off. Then one night, we were watching TV and she reached for my popcorn and stopped halfway. She pulled her hand back and said, "Sorry." Habit. That one small thing almost made me cry. Since then it's been different. Not perfect, but better. She doesn't grab food off my plate anymore without asking. She actually orders her own fries now, sometimes even too many, and then offers me some. I tease her and say, "See? Feels good to share when it's your food." She rolls her eyes but smiles. Last weekend, we were out with friends and one of the guys told this story about how his girlfriend always eats off his plate. Everyone laughed, and Lindsay looked at me and said, "Yeah, I used to do that too, until I realized it's kind of rude." I didn't say anything, but I squeezed her hand under the table. It wasn't about the fries, it never was. It was about feeling like my words didn't matter. Like my boundaries were just cute quirks to her. That video finally made her see what I'd been trying to say for years. And honestly, it saved us from a lot more resentment down the line. I still have the video saved, but I'll never show it to anyone. It's not funny to me, it's personal. It's a weird symbol of how communication can completely break down in the smallest, dumbest ways. Lindsay and I laugh about it now sometimes. She even jokes, "Want to record me not eating your fries today?" But underneath the humor, I think we both know that moment changed something in our marriage. It reminded us both that boundaries, even small ones, matter. Sometimes, it takes a little bit of embarrassment to see how someone else feels. Sometimes, the only way to make a point is to let someone watch themselves ignore you. And now, every time I order fries, I eat them slowly, peacefully, and with both hands, because for the first time in 6 years, they actually stay on my plate. It's been a little over 6 months since I posted about videotaping my wife eating all my fries to make a point. I wasn't planning on updating because, honestly, I figured the whole thing was over. But a lot more came out of it than I ever expected, and I think it's worth sharing. After I made that video and showed Lindsay, things between us were weird. She stopped taking my food completely, which was great, but for a while it felt like she was walking on eggshells. She'd ask things like, "Is it okay if I taste this?" in this quiet voice that almost made me feel guilty. I didn't want her to feel afraid of me. That was never the point. I just wanted her to take me seriously when I said something mattered to me. For a few weeks, everything felt tense. I'd be sitting at dinner, and I could feel her glancing at my plate like she was overthinking every move. It wasn't fun anymore. We weren't laughing during meals like we used to. I started wondering if I'd gone too far with the video, if I'd embarrassed her so badly that I'd damaged something between us. Then one night, she brought it up herself. We were sitting on the couch eating takeout, separate orders, our own containers, and she said, "You know, I've been thinking about that video a lot." I braced myself for another argument, but she surprised me. She said, "At first I thought it was mean. I really did. But then I started realizing why it hurt so much. It wasn't just because you recorded me. It was because I couldn't deny what I saw. That hit me hard." She said she didn't realize how often she brushed me off, not just about food, but about other things too. She said she saw it in my face, the frustration, the way I laughed it off even though I was annoyed. "I didn't like seeing that version of you," she said. "You looked tired." That conversation opened a door I didn't know we needed to walk through. We started talking, really talking, about the little ways we ignore each other, not the big dramatic arguments, but the tiny everyday moments that add up. Like how she'll ask me to hang a picture and I'll say, I will, and then forget for 2 weeks. Or how she'll say she's had a long day and I'll respond with same, instead of actually asking her what happened. We realized we'd been slowly tuning each other out, not intentionally, but out of routine. The fries were just the symptom. After that night, we made this goofy little rule. When one of us says something matters, the other person has to treat it like it's sacred, no matter how small it sounds. If it matters to one of us, it matters, period. It sounds cheesy, but it's worked. A couple of months after that talk, we went on a weekend trip to Nashville to get out of the house. We were eating at this barbecue place, and I ordered ribs with fries, of course. The waitress dropped the plates off, and I saw Lindsay looking at my fries and smiling. She said, "You know what's funny? I don't even want them anymore." I laughed and said, "Good. More for me." She leaned over and said, "But I want you to offer me one." So I did, and she took one, dramatically slow, and we both cracked up. It felt like old times, except this time it was mutual. That trip changed something between us. For the first time in a while, we actually felt close again. Not the kind of forced closeness that comes from pretending everything's fine, but real closeness. The kind that comes from knowing each other better, flaws and all. And weirdly, the whole fry incident became this kind of shorthand for communication in our marriage. Like if one of us feels ignored, we'll joke, "You're frying me right now." It's dumb, but it works, but not everything was smooth. There was one night that almost derailed the progress we'd made. A few months ago, Lindsay had her sister Megan and her husband over for dinner. We were having burgers and fries. Yeah, it's our comfort meal at this point. Megan brought up the video. Apparently, Lindsay had told her about it, thinking it was funny in hindsight. But Megan didn't think so. She said, "You really recorded her without asking? That's kinda messed up, dude," I said. It wasn't like that. And Lindsay jumped in to defend me, saying, "No, it's fine, it helped." But Megan wouldn't let it go. She said, "If my husband did that to me, I'd lose it." It got awkward fast. Lindsay was trying to explain that it wasn't about catching her doing something wrong. It was about showing her a pattern. But Megan just shook her head and said, "That's not normal behavior." After they left, Lindsay was quiet. I asked if she was upset, and she said, "No, but it's weird hearing other people judge something they don't understand." I told her, "If I could go back, I'd still do it, but I'd tell you first." She nodded and said, "Yeah, I think I would have reacted better if you had." We left it at that. Since then, things have been fine. Better than fine, actually. She even made a TikTok a few weeks ago, with my permission, joking about the woman who learned the hard way not to eat her husband's fries. It got like 200K views, and people in the comments were split between Queen of Fries and he's the pettiest man alive. We laughed about it all night, but here's what really surprised me. After that video went up, a bunch of people commented things like, "This reminds me of when my boyfriend ignores me when I tell him something bothers me." Or, "It's not about fries. It's about respect." Seeing all those strangers get it made me realize that this silly, tiny problem is something a lot of couples go through. It's never about the fries. It's about the small ways we tell our partners, "Your comfort doesn't matter as much as mine," without realizing it. I've caught myself doing it too, in different ways, like, Lindsay hates when I leave socks in the living room. I always thought it's not a big deal, but now I make sure to pick them up. Not because I suddenly care about socks, but because I care about her. It's strange how a dumb little argument over food turned into one of the biggest lessons in our marriage. We learned that sometimes, love isn't about grand gestures. It's about listening the first time someone tells you something's bothering them. Now, every Friday night, we have what we call Fry Night. We order takeout, usually from that same diner, and we eat in front of a movie. We always get 2 orders of fries. Sometimes she'll reach over and steal one anyway. And when she does, she looks at me and says, "You're recording this in your mind, aren't you?" And I say, "Absolutely." Then she grins and takes another one just to annoy me. But the difference now is that it's playful, it's mutual, it's love. I guess that's what marriage is. Learning how to fight over fries without forgetting you're on the same team. It's been about a year since the whole fry video thing blew up my marriage for a minute, and then, weirdly, put it back together. I didn't expect to post again. But this last year has been such a turning point for us that it feels right to close it out. After my last post, everything between Lindsay and me kept improving. We were laughing again, talking again, actually enjoying being around each other without that awkward tension hanging over us. But the best part was how the whole fries situation forced us to start paying attention. not just to each other's words, but to the small habits we'd both fallen into. We started seeing a couples therapist, which wasn't because we were on the brink or anything. It was more like we wanted to tune up the relationship before something small became something huge again. Our therapist, Dr. Miller, told us something that stuck with me. A boundary ignored is a relationship debt. You either pay it now with a conversation, or later with resentment. That hit me like a brick. When I'd told Lindsay not to take my fries and she did it anyway, I wasn't angry about the fries. I was angry about that debt stacking up. Every ignored request, every "you're overreacting" was like swiping a credit card with no intention to pay it off. Eventually, the interest shows up as distance, bitterness, or silence. And when Lindsay watched that video, she saw the balance due. Therapy helped us figure out that our whole dynamic had been built around little, harmless dismissals like that. Her teasing, my passive-aggressive jokes, both of us thinking we were just being playful when we were really just ignoring each other's small boundaries. Lindsay said she used to think of me as easygoing, someone who didn't really care about small stuff, and that made her comfortable pushing limits. She never thought she was disrespecting me. She just thought we were close enough that it didn't matter. Hearing her say that was both comforting and painful, because I realized I'd taught her that behavior by not standing up for myself earlier. So this year's been about reteaching each other how to listen. We made a rule that we'd both speak up once about something that bothers us, clearly and calmly. After that, the other person has to take it seriously. Not because we're perfect, but because if we ignore it after that, it's on us, and man, it's wild how much peace that brings into a house. The little things that used to turn into arguments just don't anymore. If I say I need quiet while I'm working, she gives me space. If she says she needs help cooking instead of me zoning out on my phone, I actually get up, and she doesn't eat my fries anymore. She hasn't once since that night I showed her the video. In fact, the other day, we went out with her family for her dad's birthday. We were at this steakhouse, and everyone ordered appetizers. I got fries because apparently I'm that guy now. And when the waiter put them down, her brother joked, "Careful, Lindsay might grab some." Everyone laughed, and Lindsay grinned and said, "Nah, I respect boundaries now." The whole table cracked up. But when she looked at me, I could see she meant it. I don't think I've ever loved her more than in that moment. We've both grown so much. She started painting again, something she used to love but quit after we got married because there wasn't time. Now she paints every weekend. I even helped her set up a little corner in our spare room with an easel, lights, and this tiny Bluetooth speaker that she plays 80s music on. And me? I started cooking more. Real cooking. Not just grilling burgers or throwing frozen stuff in the oven. I took a few online classes, learned how to make things from scratch. One night I made homemade fries, double fried, crispy, golden perfection, and served them with steak. Lindsay took one look and said, "I feel like this is a trust exercise." We laughed until we couldn't breathe. There's this one night that still sticks with me. About 2 months ago, we were out for dinner at a small local place. The waiter forgot to bring her fries, and when he came back with mine, she looked at them, smiled, and said, "Can I have one?" And I swear I didn't even think about it. I said, "Of course," and pushed the plate toward her. She took one fry, dipped it in ketchup, and said, "You know what's wild? I didn't even want it. I just wanted to see if you'd still flinch." And I didn't. That's when I realized that the fry thing was never just about her taking something from me. It was about me learning how to give without resentment. Because before, I wasn't really saying no to her. I was saying yes and silently stewing about it. I wasn't setting a real boundary. I was testing her to see if she'd guess where it was. That's not fair either. Boundaries aren't tests. They're communication. And both of us had to learn that now when we disagree, we actually pause before reacting. It sounds so small. But that half-second of thought before responding has saved us from a dozen arguments. And in that same weird twist of fate that the internet loves, that fry TikTok Lindsay made months ago, it somehow got picked up again. A marriage therapist duetted it and said something like, "This is the perfect example of emotional boundaries disguised as fries." It blew up all over again. People tagged me saying stuff like, "Is this you, the fry guy?" I guess I am the fry guy now. But what made me laugh most was that instead of being embarrassed, Lindsay thought it was hilarious. She even commented under one video, "We're stronger than ever now." He still guards his fries like a dragon, though. That's when I realized we were okay. Because a year ago, that comment would have made me defensive. Now, it just made me proud. Proud that we got through it. proud that she could laugh about it without either of us feeling small. Last weekend, we went back to that same diner where this whole thing started. The same booth, same waitress, same menu. I ordered my usual burger and fries, and Lindsay ordered her own fries this time, large. The waitress laughed and said, "You two finally learned to get separate fries, huh?" Lindsay grinned and said, "Oh, we learned a lot." We spent the rest of that dinner talking about where we were a year ago, how fragile everything felt back then, and how we almost let something stupid turn into something serious. And then we talked about where we are now, solid, happy, patient, and still teasing each other non-stop before we left. Lindsay took one fry from her plate and set it on mine. She said, "A peace offering." I laughed and said, "You're lucky I recorded the last one." She smirked and said, "Good. Keep this one in your memory." And I did, because now, when I think about fries, I don't think about boundaries being crossed. I think about how we learned to build better ones together. I think about how love isn't perfect or neat or movie script smooth. It's messy, it's awkward, and sometimes it looks like two people arguing over side orders until they realize they were really arguing about being heard. I look at her now, and I see a woman who didn't just apologize. She changed. And I see a man who learned that communication isn't about proving a point, it's about building a bridge. So, yeah, the fry video that almost started a cold war in our marriage turned out to be the weirdest, most unexpected blessing. And now, every Friday, we still do fry night. We sit on the couch, eat too much food, watch dumb shows, and every once in a while she'll sneak one of my fries, just to keep me humble. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Stories number 6. I woke up from a coma and realized no one came for me. Last year changed everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and what love is supposed to look like. I was 32, living in Denver at the time, working as a physical therapist. I'd gone to Los Angeles for a medical conference, and while I was there, I ended up needing emergency surgery for what I thought was just severe abdominal pain. It turned out to be a perforated intestine caused by an undiagnosed condition. The surgery itself went fine, but a few days later, I developed sepsis. Everything after that turned into static. I don't remember much. Just flashes of pain, hospital lights, people shouting, then nothing. I was in a coma for 2 weeks. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed in California, completely disoriented. My throat was sore from the breathing tube, and I had tubes everywhere. A nurse named Jessica was the one who explained what had happened. She said I'd gone septic, and it was a miracle I'd survived. I was weak, confused, and terrified. My first question was, "Where's my family?" Jessica looked at me like she didn't know how to answer. She said the hospital had contacted my emergency contact, my older sister, but no one came. They called multiple times, left messages, still nothing. At first, I thought there had to be some kind of mix-up. I asked her to call my mom, my dad, anyone. She said they'd already been contacted and that all they said was that they couldn't make the trip right now. I don't know if I've ever felt more abandoned in my life. I was lying there half alive after a 2-week coma, with no one walking through that door, no one holding my hand, no one even calling the hospital to check on me. I asked them to call my best friend Kelly back in Denver. When they did, she was horrified. She had no idea I'd even been in the hospital. Apparently, my family never told her, or anyone else. When she found out, she immediately booked a flight. She was there the next day. The moment she walked into that hospital room, I broke down. It wasn't even from the pain. It was the sheer relief of not being invisible anymore. Kelly stayed for 3 days, helping me eat, talk, and walk again. She kept asking me what my family had said, and I didn't have an answer. When I was finally strong enough to use my phone, I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring like nothing had happened. "Hey, sweetheart, how are you feeling?" she asked, in this light, casual tone I couldn't even process it. I said, "Mom, I was in a coma for 2 weeks. Why didn't anyone come?" She sighed and said, "Honey, you were all the way in California. We couldn't just drop everything and go. I didn't even know how to respond. My parents are retired. My sister works remotely. It's not like they couldn't have made arrangements." Then I asked if they told anyone else what happened. My friends, co-workers, anyone, she said. No, it didn't seem necessary. We didn't want to worry people. Didn't want to worry people. I nearly died and they didn't want to worry anyone. The call ended with her saying she was glad I was okay and that I should rest. That was it. No, we'll come see you soon. No, we're sorry. Just emptiness. After I got discharged, I stayed with Kelly in Denver for a while. She took care of me like family should have. I kept expecting my mom or sister to visit, but they didn't. I got a couple of texts, that's all. My dad didn't reach out at all. When I was well enough, I decided to go visit them. Just to get some kind of closure or explanation, I drove to their house in Colorado Springs, trying to convince myself that maybe it was a misunderstanding. When I got there, it was like walking into someone else's life. They were sitting in the living room, watching TV, completely unfazed. I asked my mom again why no one came. She said, "You were in good hands. The hospital was taking care of you." I told her that's not the point. That I woke up terrified and alone, thinking maybe no one even cared if I lived or died. She said, "Don't be dramatic. We prayed for you every night." That sentence did something to me. I think it was the way she said it. Like prayer was a substitute for presence. Like faith excused the absence, I turned to my sister, Emily, hoping she'd say something different. She just looked at me and said, "We didn't know how bad it was until you were already recovering. Mom said you were fine. That was a lie." The hospital had called multiple times saying I was critical. I left after that. I didn't yell or cry, I just walked out. In the months since, I've been in therapy trying to untangle what it means to realize your family might not actually love you in the way you always assumed. I keep thinking about how many holidays and birthdays we spent together. How we'd laugh and hug and say, "I love you." And now I can't stop wondering if any of it meant what I thought it did. My therapist said something that stuck. Some people confuse comfort with love. When you're easy to love, they show up. When it's hard, they don't know how. That hit me in the gut because that's exactly what it feels like. They love me when it's convenient, when it fits into their routine, when it doesn't cost them anything. But when it's inconvenient, when it requires effort or discomfort, they vanish. I haven't talked to them much since. My mom texts sometimes. Mostly small talk. I answer politely. But there's this wall now. It's like something died in that hospital. Not just my body trying to survive sepsis, but my faith in my family. Kelly has become my real family. She checks in every week, comes to see me when she can, and actually listens. She was there when no one else was. I've thought a lot about that empty hospital room. The sound of machines, the quiet hum of air conditioning, the way the nurse's hand felt when she squeezed mine because no one else was there to do it. That moment changed me. It taught me that blood doesn't guarantee love. And silence says more than any apology ever could. I don't think I'll ever see my parents or sister the same way again. I'm polite, I'm civil, but deep down, I know something's gone for good, and the strange part? There's peace in that. Because when I look back now, I realize that the loneliness I felt waking up in that hospital wasn't just about being physically alone. It was about finally seeing the truth for the first time. And as painful as it was, I'm glad I did. Update. It's been almost a year since everything happened, and I thought enough time had passed for things to feel less raw. But the truth is, the distance hasn't made it easier. It's just made everything clearer. After my last visit to my parents' house, I went low contact. I didn't block them or make any big announcement. I just stopped trying. No calls, no visits, no forcing conversations that always ended with me feeling small. At first, it felt wrong, like I was being ungrateful or petty. That's what years of guilt conditioning will do. I guess. You start thinking boundaries are cruelty. Around Christmas, my mom sent me a card with a generic, "We love you and hope you're doing well" message. No mention of what happened. No acknowledgement. I didn't respond. Then, on New Year's Day, my sister texted me, "Mom's upset you're ignoring her. You should call." That text made my stomach twist. For a second, I almost did call. Then I remembered what it felt like to wake up in that hospital room, weak, shaking, tubes in my arms, staring at the door waiting for someone to walk in. I remembered waiting for them. And I remembered how no one ever came. I didn't call. Instead, I spent that night with Kelly and a few friends. We made dinner, watched movies, and at midnight, I realized something huge. That was the first New Year's I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. I wasn't trying to fix things, prove something, or hold a family together that didn't want to be held. I was just living. A few months later, I got a letter from my mom. It wasn't handwritten. It was typed, which somehow made it worse. She said she was hurt and confused by my behavior, that I'd pushed everyone away after all they did for me, and that she didn't understand why I was making such a big deal out of the past. The past. I almost laughed when I read that. 2 weeks in a coma, alone, in another state. That's not the past. That's trauma. That's betrayal. I didn't respond to the letter either. My therapist told me I don't owe anyone a relationship that costs my peace. That's been my mantra lately. Meanwhile, life has been surprisingly good. My health is stable. I'm still in physical therapy, ironically for myself this time, but I'm getting stronger every month. I've started running again, slowly but surely, and Kelly, God, I don't know where I'd be without her. She's been my anchor through all of this. One weekend in May, she suggested we take a trip to California. I hadn't been back since the surgery, and part of me didn't want to go, but she said it might help me reclaim it, so we went. We even visited the hospital where I'd stayed. It was surreal walking through those halls, seeing nurses in blue scrubs, hearing that same faint beeping of monitors. Should have been terrifying, but it wasn't. It was oddly peaceful, like facing the ghost of something that used to haunt you, and realizing it doesn't have power anymore. I even ran into Jessica, the nurse who took care of me when I first woke up. She remembered me, she said. You were one of the tough ones. We didn't think you'd make it, but you did. That line hit me hard. Because she was right. I did make it, not just physically, but emotionally. I made it out of that hospital, out of that emptiness, out of the illusion that family automatically means safety. Since then, I've made a few changes. I updated my emergency contact list. Kelly is now first. My coworker Aaron is second. There's not a single family member on that list anymore. And that, honestly, feels right. A few weeks ago, my mom called. I let it go to voicemail. Her message said, "We miss you. You're being distant and cold. And I don't understand why." I played it once, then deleted it. Not out of anger, but because I realized she really doesn't understand. She can't. You can't explain abandonment to someone who refuses to see it as wrong. I've also started volunteering at a recovery support group at the hospital where I work. A lot of people there have stories like mine. Survivors who came out of the ICU with no one waiting for them. It's heartbreaking how common it is, but it's also healing in a strange way. Listening to others, sharing my story, seeing that I'm not the only one who's had to rebuild from that kind of loneliness. It's been powerful. One man in the group, an older veteran named Tom, said something that stuck with me. You can't make people show up for you. You can only decide who you'll keep the door open for next time. That line has stayed with me. My door isn't open for my family anymore, not in the same way. If they ever truly apologized, not a sorry you feel that way kind of apology, but a real one, I'd listen, but I'm done waiting for it. Waiting kept me trapped for too long. Sometimes I still think about what would have happened if I hadn't made it. Would they have even shown up then? Would they have pretended to care? I'll never know, and maybe that's for the best. I've learned that love isn't just about who you're related to. It's about who shows up. And when I was at my lowest, only one person did. Now, every morning when I wake up, I make a point to text or call the people who've shown up for me. Kelly, my friends, my coworkers who checked in, because I know how it feels when no one does. That experience stripped me down to nothing and forced me to rebuild from scratch. And now, what I'm building finally feels real. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not waiting for closure that won't come. I've made peace with the silence, and somehow, that's louder than any apology could be. I guess that's what survival looks like sometimes. Not just waking up from the coma, but choosing to live afterward, even when the people you expected to save you never came. Final update, it's been almost 2 years now. Sometimes it feels like it all happened yesterday. Other times, like it was someone else's story entirely. I've moved forward in a lot of ways, but that experience still sits quietly in the background of everything. Like a scar that doesn't hurt anymore, but still itches when it rains. After the last update, I stayed low contact with my family for several months. I didn't reach out at all, and their messages came less and less often until they stopped. For a while, that silence made me sad. There's something about being ignored by people who are supposed to love you unconditionally that never stops stinging. But over time, I realized the quiet was actually peace. The turning point came last Thanksgiving. I didn't get an invitation from my family, and I didn't send one either. Instead, Kelly and I hosted a found family dinner at my apartment. We invited a few coworkers, a couple of people from the hospital volunteer group, and even Jessica, the nurse who helped save me. It was small, cozy, and full of laughter. No fake smiles, no guilt, no eggshells, just people who wanted to be there that night. I remember looking around my kitchen, hearing the sound of forks against plates and overlapping voices, and thinking, this is what love is supposed to feel like. Not the kind that demands forgiveness without apology. Not the kind that uses obligation as currency. Just people showing up for each other because they want to. After dinner, Kelly and I sat outside with mugs of tea, and I told her I was thinking about writing a letter to my parents, not to reconcile, but to let them know I'd forgiven them. Not for their sake, but for mine. She just nodded and said, "Do it if it frees you, not if it binds you." It took me a few weeks to find the words, but I finally did it. The letter was short. I told them I didn't hate them. I told them what their absence did to me, how it changed how I see family, how I had to grieve people who were still alive. I said I forgave them, but that I couldn't rebuild a relationship that had never really existed in the first place. I mailed it, never got a response, and honestly, I'm okay with that, because forgiveness doesn't need acknowledgement. Sometimes it's just closing a door quietly and walking away. Life now looks very different. I switched jobs a few months ago, still in physical therapy, but I work at a rehabilitation center that focuses on long-term recovery. A lot of our patients have been through the same kind of isolation I faced after waking up. I connect with them in a way I couldn't before. I don't tell my full story to everyone, but when I do, it always lands with someone who says, "Yeah, my family disappeared too." There's something heartbreaking and healing about hearing that in the same breath. It reminds me that what happened to me wasn't unique, and that it wasn't my fault. Health-wise, I'm doing great. My scars are faint now, both physical and emotional. I've even started running local races again. Last month, I crossed the finish line of a 10K and burst into tears. Not because of pain, but because 2 years ago, I couldn't even stand on my own. Kelly was waiting at the finish line, cheering louder than anyone else. When I hugged her, I realized she's more than just my best friend. She's family in every way that matters. And funny enough, my circle has grown. That found family dinner became a tradition. Every few months, we host something similar. People who don't have family nearby, or who've been hurt by theirs, come together to eat, laugh, and just exist without judgment. It's chaotic, messy, and real. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Sometimes people still ask if I ever talk to my parents or sister. I usually just say, no. We went our separate ways. I don't owe anyone the full story, and I don't feel the need to explain anymore. The truth is, I stopped expecting them to be something they're not. And once I let go of that expectation, I finally stopped being angry. I've come to see that what happened wasn't just abandonment, it was revelation. It stripped away every illusion I had about unconditional love, and once I accepted that, I could finally start building something real, even if it was just for myself. Last week, I visited the ocean for the first time since that trip to California. I walked along the shore, and for a second, I thought about that hospital room. The hum of machines, the sterile light, the empty chair beside my bed. Then I looked around and saw families walking hand in hand, kids laughing, people living their lives. And I realized I'm one of them now. I made it out of that emptiness. I'm not broken anymore. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that love isn't about who's supposed to be there. It's about who is, the ones who call, who show up, who stay when it's inconvenient. Those are the people you hold on to. The rest, you let go of, no matter what their last name is. So yeah, I had surgery, I almost died, and I woke up alone. But that was just the beginning of a different kind of life, one built on truth instead of obligation. And now, when I wake up in the morning, sunlight on my face, no machines, no beeping, no waiting for someone who won't come. I feel something I didn't think I ever would again. I feel free. Stories number 7, my mom lost it. Because I didn't answer her 15 calls on my honeymoon, I didn't think I'd ever have to defend myself for ignoring my phone during my honeymoon. But here I am. I got married about 4 months ago to the love of my life, Hannah. We'd been together for 5 years, engaged for 1, and honestly, I thought I had everything planned down to the last detail. The wedding went great. Small ceremony, close friends, immediate family. It was intimate, emotional, and everything we wanted it to be. But if there was one person who made the process difficult, it was my mom. My mom, Deborah, has always had control issues. She's not a bad person, but she's the type who calls 5 times if you don't answer once. The kind of woman who insists she knows what's best for everyone, even when she doesn't. When we started planning the wedding, she wanted it to be a big family affair, with all her cousins and church friends, while I wanted something smaller. She pouted about it for weeks. I compromised on the guest list a bit, but it never felt enough for her. On the day of the wedding, she was emotional, crying about her baby boy growing up, and whispering to relatives about how she barely had any say. I brushed it off because it was supposed to be my day. Hannah and I just wanted to get through it peacefully and move on to our honeymoon in Maui. Now, Hannah and I had one rule for the honeymoon: no phones except for taking pictures and emergencies. We wanted to unplug, unwind, and actually be with each other without distractions. Before we left, I told both of our families we'd check in once we landed, and again when we got home. Everyone said that was fine, except my mom. She acted like I'd just told her I was going to live off the grid for 10 years. "What if something happens?" she asked. "Then you can text me, Mom. I'll see it eventually." Eventually? What if there's an emergency? "If it's serious, you can call once. I'll check when I can." She huffed and muttered, "I can't believe you're shutting me out like this." I thought she'd cool off. She didn't. Fast forward to our second day in Maui. Hannah and I were snorkeling, hiking, just completely disconnected. When we came back to the hotel room, my phone was blowing up. 15 missed calls from Mom, 4 voicemails, and 12 texts. The most recent one said, "I can't believe you're ignoring your own mother. I raised you better than this." For a moment, my heart dropped. I thought maybe something bad had happened. I called her back right away. She answered on the first ring, furious. "Finally, I thought you were dead." "Mom, what's wrong?" "What's wrong?" "I needed to ask if you remembered to pack your birth certificate for the name change paperwork." I was stunned. I literally thought she was about to tell me someone was in the hospital. I said, "Mom, that's not an emergency. You called me 15 times for that." She said, "Don't talk to me like that, you know I worry." I told her gently that I loved her, but this was exactly why we didn't want to be glued to our phones. She hung up on me. Hannah, bless her heart, told me not to let it ruin the trip. She said she understood my mom was just a little overbearing. But I could tell she was annoyed, and honestly, so was I. Over the next few days, I tried not to think about it, but my mom kept sending guilt trip messages like, "I guess you don't care about your family anymore. I don't know who you've turned into. Hannah's probably keeping you from me." It got so bad that I ended up muting her. I felt terrible about it, but I didn't want my wife's first week of marriage to be filled with my mom's drama. When we got back home, my mom was cold toward me. No, "Welcome back." No, "How was the trip?" Just attitude. When I went to visit her a few days later, she started crying the second I walked in. "Do you know what it felt like? Wondering if my son was alive or dead for 3 days?" "Mom, you weren't wondering that. You were mad I didn't answer your calls." "That's not true. You could have just sent a text. You could have respected that I needed space." She called me ungrateful, said she did everything for me, and now I'm too good to pick up the phone. She even said Hannah was changing me. That part really got under my skin, because Hannah has been nothing but respectful to her. But to my mom, any boundary is a personal attack. The tension got worse when we hosted a small dinner at our place for family. Mom brought it up again in front of everyone. I guess some people forget their mothers when they get married. I laughed it off awkwardly, but Hannah didn't. She said, "We were on our honeymoon, not hiding from you." My mom gave her this death glare and snapped, "I wasn't talking to you." After that, Hannah went quiet for the rest of the night. I ended up driving my mom home early just to diffuse things. She cried the whole way, saying she was losing her son. I told her, "You're not losing me, Mom. You're just refusing to let me grow up." She didn't answer. Things have been rocky since then. She's still short with Hannah, and she makes these little passive-aggressive comments whenever we talk, like, "Don't worry, I won't bother you. I know you're too busy for your mother." I've tried to explain calmly that I love her, but she needs to respect our space. She keeps saying she doesn't understand why I need boundaries with family. Last week, she even told one of my aunts that I ghosted her during the most important week of her life. My aunt called me and said, "She's just hurt. You know how she gets." Yeah, I do, but it's exhausting. The truth is, I do feel bad sometimes. She's my mom. She means well in her own twisted way. But every time I try to empathize, I remember that feeling of panic. When I saw 15 missed calls, thinking something horrible happened, only to learn it was about paperwork. And every time I picture Hannah sitting on the hotel balcony, sipping wine, trying to relax while I dealt with that chaos, I remind myself, I didn't do anything wrong. I set a boundary, and it wasn't respected. I haven't fully decided how to handle things moving forward. I still call her once a week, check in, try to keep things light. But there's a part of me that knows she'll never really get it. To her, love means constant contact. To me, it means trust. And sometimes I wonder, how do you teach someone that those two things aren't the same? Update. How things got worse. Before they got better, it's been about 3 months since I first wrote about my mom's meltdown over my not answering her 15 calls during my honeymoon. At the time, I thought the tension would fade with time, that she'd eventually realize she overreacted. But I underestimated how deep her sense of control runs. Things got messier before they started to heal, and honestly, it took a major blow-up for anything to change. Right after my last post, I decided to give my mom some space. I wasn't ignoring her. I just stopped responding instantly to every text or call. I'd answer once a week, check in, chat about work, weather, whatever. But every time she'd slip in little guilt trips. "You don't call like you used to. I miss my boy." Or, "I hope you're not too busy for your mother again." It was exhausting. Hannah told me, "You've got to stop rewarding her passive-aggressive behavior with attention." And she was right. But guilt is a weird thing. It doesn't listen to logic. Around Thanksgiving, we decided to invite both of our families to our house for dinner. It was our first time hosting as a married couple, and Hannah went all out. Candles, nice table setting, home-cooked everything. My mom offered to help, but that usually means she takes over, so Hannah politely said we had it handled. That didn't go over well. From the second she walked in, my mom was making little comments. "Wow, you didn't want me to bring my famous sweet potatoes? Guess your new wife doesn't need help. Your house looks cute? Though not what I pictured for you, it was constant. And the tension was thick enough to cut with a butter knife." Dinner went fine until dessert. My dad, who's quiet and generally avoids conflict, asked how our honeymoon was. And Hannah started telling him about the hiking trails and the snorkeling. My mom cut in, "Oh, you mean the honeymoon where no one could reach you for a week?" The room went dead silent. Hannah put her fork down and said, "Deborah, can we not?" Mom snapped, "I'm just saying, families should be able to reach each other, especially when they might need something important." I said, "Mom, that wasn't the time or place for 15 calls." She turned red. "I didn't know if you were alive," Hannah said softly. "You called 15 times, Deborah. That's not worry. That's control." My mom's eyes filled with tears. "Excuse me? I'm his mother. I raised him. I have a right to worry." I sighed and said, "You have a right to worry, but not to invade. I'm not a kid anymore." That's when she stood up and said, "This is what marriage does. It turns sons against their mothers." She grabbed her purse and left. My dad gave me this sad look like, "I'm sorry," and followed her out. That night, I felt awful, not because I thought I was wrong, but because I could see how much this dynamic had poisoned every attempt at peace. Hannah hugged me and said, "She's never going to change if you keep tiptoeing around her feelings. You've got to set the line once and for all." So, I did. The next day I went to my parents' house alone. Mom opened the door, red-eyed but still defensive. "Come to scold me some more?" she asked. I said, "No, I came to talk." We sat in the living room, the same one I grew up in. It felt strange, being there as an adult, feeling like a kid again, but also, not. I told her, "Mom, I love you, but this isn't healthy. You call me constantly. You get upset if I don't answer. You make Hannah feel like she's stealing me away. You've got to stop." She started crying again, but this time quietly. "I just miss you," she said. "You used to need me." That hit me hard, because I realized it wasn't just about control, it was fear. Fear of being left behind. Fear of losing relevance, I told her. "You'll always be my mom, but needing you and having a relationship with you are two different things. You raised me to be independent. You can't get mad at me for actually being that. She didn't say much for a while. Just nodded, wiped her eyes and said, I'll try. And to her credit, she did. At least at first, the next few weeks. She didn't call every day. Sometimes she'd just send a good morning text. She even texted Hannah an apology for being a little much lately. It wasn't perfect, but it was something then. Christmas rolled around. We decided to spend it at my parents' house to show there were no hard feelings. And for the first few hours, it was surprisingly nice. Laughter, music, my mom being civil, until she brought out this gift she said was special. It was a framed collage of childhood photos of me, from baby to graduation, with a note taped to the back that read, Before you belong to anyone else, you belong to me. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or get angry. Hannah just looked at me like, Don't say anything. After everyone left, she said, That wasn't a gift, that was a message. And she was right. My mom has this subtle way of trying to pull emotional strings without ever saying the words directly. It's manipulative, even if she doesn't realize it. I confronted her about it a few days later. She said, You're reading too much into everything. It's a mother's love, I said. It's smothering, Mom. That's not love. It's control disguised as care. That didn't go over well. She told me I was being cruel and that Hannah had brainwashed me. We didn't talk for a month after that. Then out of nowhere she called. One call, no texts. No guilt trips, just one call. When I answered, she said, I've been going to therapy. I was stunned. She told me her doctor, apparently her GP, referred her suggested counseling. After she admitted how anxious she gets when she doesn't hear from me, she said, I didn't realize how much I tied your attention to my self-worth. That conversation changed everything. For the first time, she took responsibility instead of deflecting. She's been in therapy for 2 months now. She still calls sometimes, but it's once or twice a week. Not every day, and when she does, she asks, Is this a good time to talk? Which, if you knew my mom, is a huge step. Last weekend, Hannah and I went over for dinner. Mom hugged her first, not me. Her, she said. Thank you for being patient with me, Hannah almost cried. I kind of did too. I don't know if everything will stay perfect. My mom's a work in progress, just like I am. But for the first time in my life, I feel like she's actually trying to respect my space. It took a breakdown, a few fights, and some therapy. But maybe, just maybe, she's learning that love doesn't have to mean constant contact. Sometimes it means letting go enough for the other person to breathe. And honestly, I think we both needed that. Final update, the breakthrough, the rebuild, and the quiet understanding. It's been almost a full year since the whole honeymoon phone call fiasco. And sitting here now, I can say this past year has changed the entire landscape of my relationship with my mom. It's been messy, surprising, healing, and, in its own way, beautiful. After my last update, things were cautiously good for a while. Mom was sticking with therapy, calling less often, and even starting to develop her own life again. She joined a book club, started volunteering at the local animal shelter, and for the first time in years, she had stuff to talk about that wasn't me. At first, I didn't realize how much that meant. But now I see, for most of my life, I'd been the center of her world when I left home. She never really filled that space with anything else. So when I pulled back, it wasn't just about missing me. It was like her whole identity cracked around April. Hannah and I invited my parents over for dinner again. I was nervous because the last few family gatherings had been delicate, to say the least. But that night went surprisingly well. Mom helped Hannah in the kitchen, not taking over, just helping. And I saw her actually ask Hannah what she needed instead of assuming. At one point while we were eating, Mom said, I read something in therapy that made me think of you. She turned to Hannah and said, It said, when a son gets married, a mother doesn't lose him. She gains the chance to love someone who loves him. I didn't get that before. I think I do now. It was quiet after that, the kind of quiet where no one wants to ruin the moment. After they left, Hannah hugged me and said, That's the woman you were trying to show me all along. Things weren't perfect after that, but they were normal, and that felt like a miracle. Mom stopped trying to compete with Hannah for my attention. She'd call and ask about my work, or tell me about the dogs she walked at the shelter. Once, she even texted Hannah first to ask for a recipe. That's when I knew things had really changed. But the biggest turning point came in July. Hannah and I found out she was pregnant. Totally unexpected, but we were over the moon. We decided to wait until the second trimester to tell family. When we finally did, my mom burst into tears. Not the guilt trip kind, but pure, joyful, human tears. She hugged Hannah first, then me. And then she said something that floored me. "I promise I won't smother this baby the way I smothered you." We all laughed, but her voice cracked when she said it. That was the first time she'd ever admitted, out loud, that her behavior toward me was controlling. It wasn't just her trying to justify it as love, it was an acknowledgement. From then on, she's been nothing but supportive. No overbearing calls, no unsolicited advice. When Hannah started having morning sickness, Mom asked, "Do you want me to come over? Or would that be too much right now?" That sentence, those 8 words, were proof of growth. She was giving us the option. When Hannah hit her second trimester, we invited my parents to the ultrasound appointment. My dad cried, obviously, but what surprised me was how calm my mom was. She held Hannah's hand and whispered, "You're doing amazing." Afterward, she turned to me and said, "You're going to be such a good dad. You were always more patient with me than I deserved." That hit me right in the chest. For years I'd resented her. I'd felt trapped, suffocated, frustrated, and now, sitting in that dark ultrasound room, watching the tiny flicker of our baby's heartbeat, I realized something. She wasn't trying to control me out of malice. She was trying to keep from losing the one person she'd built her whole world around. It doesn't excuse how she acted, but it explains it. And understanding that gave me peace. Now, as I write this, Hannah's due in a few weeks. My mom's excited but respectful. She asked before buying anything for the baby. Before planning any grandma stuff, she even said, "I'll wait for your call when you're ready for visitors." If you told me a year ago that my mom, the same woman who once left 15 missed calls over paperwork, would say something like that, I would have laughed you out of the room. But people can change, not easily, not perfectly, and not without work, but they can. The other night, I called her after work just to chat. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, just because I wanted to. We talked about her book club, her garden, and how she's been helping train one of the rescue dogs to be therapy certified. She sounded happy. Before we hung up, she said, "I know I used to call too much. I was scared. You were my whole world. But now, I think I like being a part of yours instead." I sat there for a second, staring at my phone, realizing how far we'd come from those angry phone calls and tears. When I told Hannah, she smiled and said, "That's growth. For both of you." She's right. I had to learn to set boundaries without guilt. Mom had to learn to love without control. We both stumbled, but we got there. So yeah, it started with 15 missed calls. It felt like the end of something then, but maybe it was just the beginning of something better. A relationship where love isn't measured by how often someone calls, but by how much they listen when you finally do. And when our daughter is born, I know one thing for sure. She'll have a grandmother who's still learning, still growing, but trying her best. And that's all I could ever ask for. Stories number 8. My girlfriend told me she wants a baby. And I ended the relationship that night. I'm 32. And until recently, I thought I'd found the person I'd spend the rest of my life with. Her name was Brooke. She's 30. Beautiful in this effortless, no makeup needed way. Funny, thoughtful, steady. We'd been together for almost 3 years. Living together for the last 14 months. We met at a trivia night downtown, both competing on different teams. I made a joke about her team's terrible band name answer, and she fired back something about my dad joke energy. I laughed. She laughed. We started talking after, and I asked for her number before the night ended. From that first date, everything felt easy. Brooke had this calm, confident energy that grounded me. I've always been the anxious one, the overthinker, the guy who needs a plan for everything. She was spontaneous and sure of herself in a way that made me feel safe. We moved in together after 2 years, something I'd never done before. For the first time, cohabitating didn't feel like a risk. It felt natural. The thing is, I've always known I don't want kids. Not in a bitter, anti-kid way. I actually like kids. I'm great with my niece and nephew. I volunteer sometimes at a youth program, and I think parents are superheroes. But I've known since I was maybe 19 that I don't want to be one. It's not about fear or immaturity. It's about knowing the life I want. I like quiet. I like freedom. I like being able to get up and decide to take a weekend trip without arranging childcare or worrying about college funds. I want a life that's just me and my partner. Simple, peaceful, uncluttered. I told Brooke this early on. Probably on our 4th or 5th date. I didn't make it dramatic, just said, "I should tell you up front. I don't want kids. Ever. So if that's something you want, I completely understand, but we should be honest about it." She told me she wasn't sure yet but didn't feel strongly about having them. She said she wasn't ruling it out, but she didn't feel the pull either. I remember asking, "Would it be a deal breaker for you if you decided someday that you did?" And she said, "I don't think so. I've never really pictured myself as a mom." That was enough for me. Fast forward 3 years. We were living together in a cozy 2-bedroom apartment outside Portland, both working full-time jobs, our routines overlapping comfortably. We had our quirks. I was messy with laundry. She left half-drunk coffees around the house. But we worked. I thought we were solid. Then one night, everything changed over a bowl of pasta. It was a Thursday. I'd cooked dinner, spaghetti with spicy sausage, her favorite. And we were sitting at the table talking about her co-worker's maternity leave. Brooke mentioned that the woman's baby pictures were so cute it hurt. I laughed and said something like, "Yeah, cute from afar. I'll stick with dogs." She smiled but didn't say anything. Then after a pause she said, "You know, I've been thinking about that a lot lately, kids." I looked up. "Yeah?" She twirled her pasta and said, "I think I want one. Maybe not right this second, but soon." I froze. It's a weird thing when someone says something that shifts your whole future in a single sentence. You can almost feel the floor tilt. I tried to stay calm, but my stomach was already dropping. I said, "Okay, what do you mean by soon?" She shrugged. "Not this year, but I'm 30 now. I've started to feel like, I don't know, like something's missing. I love our life, but I also think I'd regret not experiencing that. Being a mom. I didn't think I would, but I do." I just sat there, quiet. She looked nervous, like she already knew what I was thinking. Finally I said, "You know that's not something I can do, right?" She nodded slowly. "I know. But I also know people change their minds." "I haven't," I said. "I know," she repeated, and I could see her eyes glisten a little. "But I was hoping maybe one day you might." That's when it hit me that we weren't just talking about a hypothetical difference anymore. We were standing on opposite sides of a line. I said, "Brooke, I love you. But I'm not going to change my mind. I can't. It wouldn't be fair to either of us." She looked down and whispered, "Then I guess we want different things." We sat there in silence for what felt like forever. The only sound was the hum of the fridge. I wanted to say something that would fix it. Something smart, something loving. But there was nothing left to say that wouldn't be dishonest. That night, she slept in the guest room. Neither of us really slept. I could hear her crying through the wall. I wanted to go comfort her so badly, but I also knew that if I did, we'd probably end up trying to patch it over again. And I couldn't do that this time. The next morning, she came into the kitchen wearing my hoodie, holding a cup of coffee. Her eyes were red but calm. She said, "I know you meant what you said. I don't want to change you, but I also can't pretend I don't want this now." I nodded. "I know. We didn't yell, we didn't argue. It was one of the quietest breakups I've ever experienced, but also the most painful. We spent the next 2 weeks sorting out logistics. The lease, the furniture, who kept what, every night. I'd sit on the couch watching her pack, and part of me wanted to beg her to stay. But every time that urge came up, I imagined the resentment she'd feel 5 years from now when she was still childless because of me, or the resentment I'd feel if she convinced me to have a kid I didn't want. That thought sobered me fast. When she finally moved out, the apartment felt wrong, too quiet, too big. Her side of the closet was empty. Her laugh wasn't echoing down the hall, and I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text her something funny before remembering I couldn't. The first few weeks were brutal. I kept second-guessing myself. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and think, what if I could have done it? What if I could have been a dad? But deep down, I knew it wasn't about capability. It was about truth. Brooke wanted to grow into something I couldn't become. And that's not wrong. It's just incompatible. A couple of months later, she reached out to grab coffee. I was nervous, but I agreed. We met at this small cafe near her new apartment. She looked good, lighter somehow. We talked about how things had been. She told me she was seeing someone new, casually, and that she was happy. It stung, but it also weirdly made me proud of her. Before we left, she said, "I hope you know I never thought you were selfish. You just knew yourself better than I did," I told her. "And I hope you know I never thought you were unreasonable. You just wanted something beautiful that I couldn't give." We hugged, and that was the last time we saw each other. It's been almost a year now. I still think about her sometimes. The way she laughed. The way she used to fall asleep halfway through movies. The way she'd hum when she was cooking. But I don't regret my decision. People keep telling me, you'll change your mind one day, like it's inevitable. Maybe I will, though I doubt it, but if I do, I want it to be because I changed, not because I was scared of losing someone. I think that's what love is supposed to be. Not forcing each other to bend until we break, but respecting each other enough to walk away when the paths don't line up anymore. Sometimes, when I see a dad playing with his kid at the park, I feel this strange mix of admiration and peace. Admiration for the love that kind of commitment takes, and peace knowing I was honest about not being built for it. And if Brooke ever does become a mom someday, I know she'll be an amazing one. She had that quiet strength, that endless patience, that warmth that kids gravitate toward. I'll always love that about her, but as for me, I'm okay being the guy who ends the relationship over something that deep, because pretending you want the same future as someone else just to keep them around, that's not love. That's fear, and I've finally learned how to tell the difference. It's been almost 2 years since that night at the kitchen table when everything between Brooke and me quietly fell apart. I didn't think I'd ever write about it again, but time does weird things to you. It softens some memories and sharpens others. And sometimes the things you thought you'd made peace with sneak back up when you least expect it. The first 6 months after the breakup were strange. I had this combination of relief and grief that never made sense together. Some days I felt light, like I'd dodged a bullet that would have turned into a lifetime of quiet resentment. Other days I'd come home to the echo of my own footsteps and wonder if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I filled the space with work. I'm a project manager for a construction firm, which means my days were long and loud. Exactly what I needed to drown out the silence. When I wasn't working, I ran. I started training for a half marathon, mostly just to have something to move toward. I'd run past playgrounds, hear kids laughing, and I'd feel that old ache again. Not because I wanted that life, but because I missed having someone to share any life with. Brooke and I didn't talk after that coffee meetup. Not out of anger, but out of respect. It's weird. When you love someone that much, cutting contact feels cruel. But sometimes it's the kindest thing you can do. About 8 months after the breakup, I met someone new. Her name's Hannah. We met through a mutual friend at a barbecue. She was telling a story about accidentally adopting a cat that turned out to be pregnant, and I laughed harder than I had in months. She's got this dry, quick humor that sneaks up on you. We started seeing each other casually at first. I told her right away, I don't want kids. Just so you know. It came out awkwardly, like I was reading a legal disclaimer. She smiled and said, "Good, me neither. I have too many plants to keep alive as it is." It felt easy in a way that surprised me. No quiet dread about the future. No second-guessing every long-term question, just peace. We'd spend weekends hiking, cooking, sometimes just lying around doing nothing. For the first time since Brooke, I wasn't comparing. I wasn't replaying conversations or wishing for different endings. But then last winter, Brooke emailed me. It wasn't dramatic. Just a short message asking if I'd be okay grabbing coffee sometime. My stomach dropped when I saw her name. I showed it to Hannah right away. I didn't want to hide anything, she said. If you need closure or just want to see her, that's okay. That's one of the things I love about Hannah. She's secure in herself in a way that makes me feel safe being honest. I agreed to meet Brooke. We picked the same cafe as before. I got there early and sat by the window. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her at first. She had shorter hair, wore glasses, and carried this quiet confidence that wasn't there before. We hugged, awkward at first but warm. Then she said, "You look good, happier." I told her she did too. We talked for almost 2 hours. She told me she'd moved to Seattle for a new job at a marketing agency, that she'd been dating someone named Caleb for about a year. She said he was kind, steady, and most importantly, that he wanted kids too. She looked genuinely happy when she said it. That was the moment I knew I'd made the right choice, even if it had hurt like hell. She said she'd thought a lot about how we ended things. "I used to wonder if you just gave up too easily," she said. "But now I get it. You didn't give up. You just refused to make either of us smaller to fit the other's life." That sentence broke me a little. We talked about the old apartment, the dog we always said we'd adopt but never did, the weird pasta sauce she used to love. It didn't feel like reopening a wound, more like gently closing one that never quite healed right. Before we left, she said, "I wanted to thank you for letting me go when you did. I didn't understand it then, but I do now." I told her I was glad she reached out. I meant it. We hugged again, and when she walked out the door, I felt something unclench inside me that had been tight for 2 years. It wasn't sadness or longing. It was closure. Real, complete closure. When I told Hannah about it later, she smiled and said, "Good. I like knowing you're free of that ghost." Then she leaned over and kissed me and said, "Now can we finally get a dog instead of all this emotional baggage?" We got one 3 weeks later. His name's Baxter. A rescue mutt with floppy ears and more energy than sense. He's the closest thing I'll ever have to a kid, and I'm perfectly okay with that. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on the couch with Hannah and Baxter's asleep on our feet, I think about how close I came to choosing a different path. A version of me that said yes to kids, not because he wanted them, but because he was afraid to lose someone. That version of me might have been miserable. Or worse, might have made someone else miserable. I think a lot about how people equate love with sacrifice. And sure, love takes compromise, patience, effort, but sacrifice? That word scares me now. Because if the cost of love is your peace or your truth, then it's not love anymore. It's self-erasure. Brooke taught me that. Not intentionally, but by being brave enough to admit she wanted something I couldn't give. A few weeks ago, I got an email from her again. Just a picture. No words. It was her and Caleb holding a newborn baby, both smiling, exhausted but glowing. I stared at it for a long time. Then I smiled too. I didn't feel jealous. I didn't feel sad. I felt proud. Proud that she got her happy ending. Proud that I'd let her go to find it. Proud that I stayed true to what I knew. I showed Hannah, and she smiled and said, "She looks happy. That's really sweet." It's funny. If someone had told me 3 years ago that I'd end up in a quiet house with a dog instead of a baby, drinking coffee with a woman who loves the same kind of silence I do, I would have thought that sounded lonely. But it's not. It's peaceful. It's right. Every now and then, I'll hear a baby cry in a grocery store, or see a toddler throwing a tantrum, and I'll feel this small pang. Not of longing, but of recognition. That could have been my life. It's just not my life. And when I think about Brooke, her baby, her family, her future, I realize that walking away wasn't an ending. It was the most honest kind of love either of us could have given. Love isn't always staying. Sometimes it's having the courage to say, "You deserve the life you want, even if it's not with me." That's what we did. And for the first time, I understand what peace really feels like. It's been almost 6 years now since that quiet night when Brooke and I sat across from each other at our kitchen table, eating spaghetti and realizing we were headed in different directions. 6 years, long enough for life to shift completely, for the sharp edges of heartbreak to turn into smooth stones you just carry in your pocket. If you'd told me back then that I'd look back on that night with gratitude instead of grief, I would have laughed in your face. But here I am, sitting on the porch of a little house I bought last year with Hannah, watching the dog chase a tennis ball in the yard, and all I can think is, sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that save you. Life with Hannah has been good. Not perfect, but solid in a way that feels like peace. We moved to Bend, Oregon about 2 years ago. We wanted space and mountains and quiet mornings. And that's exactly what we got. She works remotely as a UX designer, and I still manage construction projects, though now mostly for smaller residential builds. On weekends, we hike or sit in coffee shops or just watch bad TV. Every so often, someone new we meet will ask, "So do you guys have kids?" And we'll just smile at each other before one of us says, "Nope, just the furry one." There's always that pause, that faint flicker in their eyes like they're wondering if we're missing something. Maybe we are, in their eyes. But in ours, we're exactly where we're meant to be. A few months ago, we went to a friend's wedding in Seattle. One of Hannah's old college friends. During the reception, I stepped outside for some air. I was standing near the patio, looking out at the city lights. When I heard someone say my name, it was Brooke. I almost didn't recognize her at first. She was wearing this soft blue dress, her hair tied up, and she looked mature, in the best way grounded. She smiled. And for a second, I felt like I was 29 again, sitting across from her in our old apartment. We hugged, a little awkwardly, then started catching up. She told me she was still with Caleb. They'd gotten married 2 years ago and had 2 kids now, a 4-year-old daughter and a baby boy. She showed me pictures on her phone, the kind that make you smile even if you don't know the people in them. Her daughter had Brooke's eyes. Then she said, "I saw your name on the guest list and almost didn't come over." I didn't know if it would be weird, I laughed and said, "Weird maybe, but not bad. Definitely not bad." We talked for a while. She told me about their house, their chaos, their exhaustion, and their joy. I told her about the mountains. The quiet, the dog, the peace. At one point she said, "You look content." And I said, "You do too." And we were both right. After a few minutes, Caleb came over. Tall guy, friendly smile, handshake that meant it. We chatted a bit, and honestly, I liked him immediately. There wasn't any bitterness, no jealousy, no lingering awkwardness, just mutual respect for the fact that we'd both built lives that made us happy, even if they existed on opposite sides of a choice that once broke our hearts. Before they went back inside, Brooke looked at me and said quietly, "I think we turned out okay." I nodded. "Yeah, I think we did." After they left, I stood there for a while, watching the lights of the city, listening to the faint echo of music from the reception. I thought about how easily that conversation could have been painful. But it wasn't. It was like closing a book that once hurt too much to finish, and realizing it had a beautiful ending after all. When I got back inside, Hannah was on the dance floor, laughing with her friends. She waved me over and I went, and when she grabbed my hand and pulled me close, I just held her tighter than usual because right then, I understood something I hadn't been able to put into words before. Love isn't about getting everything you want from one person. It's about finding the life that feels true and having someone beside you who fits into that truth. Not because they fill your gaps, but because they stand whole next to you. That night, driving back to our Airbnb, Hannah asked, "So, was that Brooke?" I said yeah, told her about the quick conversation. She smiled, squeezed my hand and said, "Good. I'm glad you got to see that chapter closed." When we got home a few days later, I couldn't stop thinking about that phrase. Chapter closed. It didn't feel like closing something, though. It felt like acknowledging that every person you love leaves fingerprints on who you become. Brooke taught me what honesty costs. Hannah taught me what peace feels like, and both are worth everything. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on the porch at night with a drink, listening to the wind move through the trees, I think about how different things could have been. I could have forced myself into fatherhood, hoping it would grow on me. I could have stayed silent to keep the relationship alive. I could have ignored the voice in my gut telling me that love and compatibility aren't the same thing. But if I had, I wouldn't be here. Not in this house, not with this life, not with this version of myself that feels whole. Last week, Hannah and I adopted another rescue dog, a smaller one this time, a little terrier mix that Baxter has already decided is his annoying little brother. Our house is full of fur and muddy paw prints and laughter. It's not quiet all the time anymore, but it's the kind of noise that feels like home. Sometimes I'll catch Hannah watching the dogs tumble around the living room and she'll say, "You know, we might have been really good parents." And I'll smile and say, "Yeah, maybe, but we're really good us." She laughs every time I say that, but it's true. Every once in a while, I get an email from Brooke, usually around the holidays. She sends a photo of her family, her kids in matching pajamas, the kind of picture you'd put on a Christmas card. I always reply with a short message and a photo of our dogs in ridiculous sweaters. It's simple, it's kind, it's enough. There's no lingering tension, no what-ifs. Just two people who once loved each other deeply and chose honesty over comfort, and found peace on the other side of it. If there's anything I've learned from all of this, it's that love doesn't always mean staying together. Sometimes it means walking away so that both of you can find the life you're supposed to have. I used to think ending a relationship because of something like wanting or not wanting kids was a tragedy. Now I think it's one of the most human things there is. Realizing that love can be true, and still not be enough to bridge the gap between two futures that don't align. And honestly, that's okay. Brooke has her family. I have mine. Even if it's made of dogs and weekend hikes instead of bedtime stories and school runs. We both built the lives we wanted, and when I look back on everything, the heartbreak, the silence, the rebuilding, I realize it wasn't a story about loss. It was a story about choosing truth, even when it breaks your heart, because that's the only way to find real peace. So yeah, I think we turned out okay. Stories number 9. They started tracking our mouse movement at work. I've worked for a mid-sized marketing firm in Chicago for 5 years now. And for the most part, I've liked it. The pay's decent, the people are fine, and I've built a pretty solid reputation for being reliable. My boss, Mark, used to call me one of his anchor employees. The kind of person who keeps things steady when everyone else is losing it. That was before the company decided to go full Big Brother on us. It started earlier this year when leadership announced a new remote accountability system. The name sounded like something straight out of a corporate dystopia. They framed it as a productivity enhancement tool, which, in HR speak means we don't trust you. Apparently, the system tracks keystrokes, idle time, and even mouse movement. At first I thought it was a joke. I literally laughed during the Zoom call and waited for someone to crack a smile. No one did. Mark just looked down at his notes, and our HR rep Laura explained in her soft, rehearsed voice that this new initiative ensures fairness and alignment across all remote staff. Fairness, right. When the software rolled out, we were told it would run silently in the background within 2 days. My friend Riley, who's in IT, messaged me privately. Yeah, it logs everything, mouse activity, typing speed, idle time, even if you scroll too slow. I thought Riley was exaggerating, but then I started getting those reminder nudges. They'd pop up on my screen if my cursor stayed still for too long. Once, during a client call, I was actively talking, not typing, and I got a little window that said, System detected inactivity. Please engage with your workstation. Engage with my workstation? I was literally talking to a client about their campaign strategy. What did they want me to do? Move my mouse in circles like a hamster wheel? The next day, I started noticing my coworkers acting weird. People were jittery, constantly clicking or dragging their mouse across the screen even when they weren't working on anything. You could see it in meetings, too. Everyone's hands were moving just off camera. The paranoia set in fast. Riley said the program created activity scores that went straight to management. If your score dipped below a certain threshold, you'd get flagged for performance review, basically. If you dared to take your hands off your mouse to eat lunch or, God forbid, think for a second, you were underperforming. One day, I got flagged. It was a Friday afternoon. I'd spent half the day editing campaign materials and building a new proposal deck. Then I hopped on a client call for an hour, during which my mouse wasn't moving because, obviously, I was talking. That Monday, Mark asked to check in. He pulled up a spreadsheet showing my activity data. According to the system, I had a 28-minute unproductive window. Unproductive? I said. That was the client call with Lakeshore Dental, he frowned, clearly uncomfortable. I know, but the system doesn't distinguish between calls and idle time yet. We just have to make sure the data stays clean. Clean. Another word for obedient. I left that meeting fuming. I used to like Mark, but now he was defending spyware. When I vented to Riley, they told me there was talk of people getting written up over these scores. One coworker, Hannah, apparently got docked a bonus because her activity trendline dipped below 90% for 2 weeks. I started testing the system. When I had to read long documents, I'd put a paperweight on my mouse to keep it slightly moving. It worked. My score went back up. I told Riley, who said, "You're not the only one. Half the office is doing the same thing." We were basically performing productivity now. The actual work didn't matter as much as keeping the computer fooled. It was ridiculous. Then came the meeting that pushed me over the edge. The CEO, Darren, called a virtual town hall to talk about our commitment to integrity in the remote workplace. He congratulated the top performers, basically, the people who moved their mice the most, and said the system was proving its worth. Then he dropped the bomb. Starting next quarter, the data would influence promotions and raises. That was it for me. I knew I couldn't do another year of pretending to be a robot. That night, I opened a private chat with a handful of trusted coworkers, Riley, Hannah, and 2 others from design. We decided to gather screenshots and logs to prove how the system penalized actual productivity in favor of mindless movement. Riley, being in IT, knew where to find back-end logs showing the inconsistencies. Over the next few weeks, we quietly documented everything. Missed calls, inaccurate flags, error messages, every glitch that showed the system wasn't tracking real work. Riley even found a line in the internal tech report, admitting that the software couldn't differentiate between Zoom calls and inactivity. We compiled everything into a report and sent it, anonymously, to HR. The legal department, and a few journalists we knew followed tech privacy issues. 2 weeks later, chaos hit, the article dropped. It blew up on LinkedIn and Twitter overnight. Chicago firm monitors mouse movements. Penalizes employees for thinking. Our company's name was right there in the headline. By morning, every internal channel was in meltdown mode. Darren tried to downplay it, saying the system was still in testing. But that didn't fly. Clients started asking questions. A few threatened to pull their contracts. HR sent out a panicked, "We hear your concerns" email that didn't address a single one of them. Within a week, they quietly disabled the tracking feature. A month later, Darren stepped down to pursue new opportunities. The system stayed technically in place, but now it only logs work submissions, not activity metrics. Mark apologized to me privately. He said he never agreed with it but felt powerless to push back. I told him I understood, but that the whole thing had permanently changed how I saw this company. I'm still here, for now. The economy's rough, and I need the paycheck, but I'm looking. Every interview I've done since, I ask about trust culture before anything else. If they so much as mention monitoring tools, I thank them for their time and hang up. The funniest part? My productivity actually went up after the system was removed, turns out. Being treated like a human being makes you work harder than being watched like a lab rat. It's kind of poetic, really. The company spent thousands on software to make sure I was working. In the end, all it did was prove how little they understood about trust. If they'd just asked, I could have told them that for free. Update. It's been about 6 months since everything blew up at the company, and things have changed. But not all in the way I expected. Some for the better, some for the weirdly worse. After the whole Mousegate story hit the internet, the company went into full-on damage control mode. HR rolled out a new trust and transparency initiative, ironic, considering the reason we needed one. They started doing these optional listening sessions, where management would sit in and pretend to care about how everyone felt. Most people didn't show up. Those who did just used it as an open mic to vent, I'll admit. The first few weeks after the scandal were kind of satisfying. Watching Darren step down, seeing leadership scramble to rewrite their remote culture policy. It all felt like justice. I'd wake up, open LinkedIn, and see posts dragging corporate surveillance and quoting our story. It was vindicating, but then the dust settled. And reality came back. Hannah got laid off in what they called a post-restructuring adjustment. Officially, it wasn't related to the monitoring scandal, but everyone knew it was. She'd been outspoken during the meetings, and was one of the few who actually confronted leadership publicly. They framed it as a reduction in redundancy. Translation. She spoke too loudly. Riley, who was the closest thing I had to an ally in this, quit 2 months later. They told me they were burned out and didn't trust the company not to retaliate later. IT had been getting strange requests from higher-ups to review internal communications. And even though they didn't find anything, Riley didn't want to stick around to see what might happen next. When Riley left, it hit me harder than I expected. We'd been messaging almost every day through the whole ordeal. After they left, the office chat felt empty, quiet in the wrong kind of way. As for me, I've kept my head down. I'm still here, but it doesn't feel like the same job. The vibe is off. Before, we were this scrappy team that actually cared about building creative campaigns. Now it's a company that looks over its own shoulder. Mark's still my manager, but he's different too, a little more reserved. He apologized again recently, said the whole thing taught him a lot about ethical leadership. I nodded and smiled, but deep down, I don't think he really gets it. He still talks like he's trying to win points with corporate instead of his own team. The remote accountability system is technically gone, but not entirely. They disabled the active tracking features, but the software itself still runs passively. It logs logins and document access for compliance purposes. The phrasing is vague enough that nobody knows exactly what's still being recorded. Every so often I'll see my cursor freeze for a second and think, are they watching again? It's exhausting, that little flicker of paranoia that doesn't quite go away. A few weeks ago, a recruiter reached out with a position at a smaller marketing agency based in Austin. Fully remote, no surveillance tools, no engagement metrics, just trust and deadlines. I did the first 2 interviews and loved the vibe. Casual, honest, human. But I hesitated. I think part of me wanted to stay just long enough to see if my company would actually fix itself. Like if I stuck around, maybe I could help shift the culture. But after watching Hannah get quietly pushed out and Riley's role left unfilled, I'm starting to think some systems don't heal. They just rebrand their damage. Last week, we had our quarterly meeting. The new CEO, Ellen, a sharp, clean-cut woman from a consulting background, gave a long speech about embracing digital accountability in a hybrid world. My stomach turned when I heard that phrase. She used all the buzzwords Darren used to: alignment, synergy, trust. But with this sterile, rehearsed polish that made it worse. Halfway through, I realized I'd already made my decision that night. I updated my resume and sent it to the Austin recruiter. I haven't told anyone at work yet, not even Mark. I'm keeping it quiet until I have an offer in hand. I can't afford to be restructured like Hannah. The strangest part is how much this whole thing has changed my relationship with work in general. I used to care deeply about being the reliable one, the go-to person. Now, I just want balance. I want to do my job, do it well, and close my laptop without feeling like someone's judging my mouse movement from across the country. I've noticed other coworkers slowly checking out too. People don't volunteer for extra projects anymore. Cameras stay off. There's this unspoken fatigue, like everyone's waiting for something else to break. One small, almost funny thing. I still keep that paperweight on my desk. The one I used to keep my mouse moving, I don't need it anymore. But I can't bring myself to throw it out. It's become this quiet little reminder. You can't automate trust if that Austin offer comes through. I'm taking it. No hesitation this time. I'll pack up, move on, and let this company keep chasing whatever version of accountability makes them sleep at night. I've learned my lesson the hard way. Never stay somewhere that confuses control for trust. Because once they start tracking your mouse, it's only a matter of time before they start tracking your soul too. Final update. It's been almost a year since I wrote that last post. And honestly, I didn't think I'd come back to update again. But so much has changed since then. Some of it almost poetic. Some of it messy. And it feels like a full circle moment that's worth closing out properly. I did end up taking that job in Austin. The smaller marketing agency was called Blue Pine Creative. And from the very first week, I knew I'd made the right decision. The culture was night and day compared to where I came from. My new boss, Samantha, didn't care about how often I moved my mouse or when I logged in, as long as I met deadlines and communicated well. It sounds like such a basic thing, but after what I went through, it felt revolutionary. I remember my first Friday there. I sent Sam a message at 5:30 asking if she needed anything else before I logged off. Her reply, "It's Friday, go live your life." I almost cried. That's how warped my sense of normal had become. I was shocked that a boss didn't need proof of my every movement to trust that I was doing my job. Transitioning away from my old company, though it wasn't smooth, when I turned in my resignation, Mark seemed genuinely sad. He said he understood but wished I'd stay to see the new direction under Ellen. I told him I hoped they figured it out, but I couldn't keep waiting for a culture shift that might never happen. He nodded and said quietly, "Can't blame you." It was one of the few honest things he'd said in months. 2 weeks later, Hannah reached out to me out of the blue. She'd seen my LinkedIn post about moving to Austin and wanted to catch up. We ended up on a long call that turned into something like therapy for both of us. She told me she was freelancing full-time now and happier than she'd been in years. "Once you stop working for people who measure your worth by mouse clicks," she said, "you remember you're a person again." That line stuck with me. Funny enough, Riley ended up back in Chicago working in cybersecurity for a nonprofit. They called me a few months ago to tell me that our old company had finally been hit with a class action privacy lawsuit. Apparently, some employees discovered that even after disabling the tracking system, the software had still been logging data silently. No one had told staff, of course, classic. Riley said the lawsuit was still ongoing, but it made national tech news again. The headline was brutal. "Marketing firm caught secretly monitoring employees." Despite public denials. When I saw it, I didn't even feel angry, just numb. It was confirmation of what we'd all known. They never stopped watching. A few of my old coworkers reached out after that story broke. Most of them had already left. Mark did too, apparently. He's at some smaller agency now in Denver. Ellen's still listed as CEO. But the company's Glassdoor reviews are brutal. It's like watching the slow decay of something you once cared about but can't save. As for me, life is quieter now, but in a good way. My days start with coffee on my balcony, instead of a panicked glance at an activity dashboard. I work hard. I meet my goals, and when I close my laptop, I'm done. No guilt, no phantom pressure, no wondering if my cursor betrayed me. It's strange how much I had to unlearn. For months, I caught myself fidgeting with my mouse out of habit, afraid that stillness might look suspicious. Even though no one's tracking me anymore, that conditioning doesn't vanish overnight. It took time, and a lot of patience with myself, to stop performing productivity and just be productive. One moment that really hit me came during our team retreat in May. We were doing a group brainstorming session, and I realized no one was multitasking. No one was pretending to type or move their mouse while someone else talked. Everyone was just listening, fully present. I remember thinking, this is what trust looks like. Since moving to Austin, I've started volunteering with a digital rights nonprofit that focuses on privacy in the workplace. Riley actually helped me connect with them, We're working on a project to educate remote workers about monitoring software and their rights under state and federal law. It feels meaningful. Like maybe all the frustration and fear I went through can turn into something useful. I even gave a short talk at a local tech meetup last month. I shared my story. Not the dramatic version, just the honest one. I told them about how my company thought tracking every second would make us more efficient but ended up killing morale and trust instead. I told them that the best workers aren't the ones who move their mouse the most. They're the ones who feel safe enough to think after the talk. A woman from the audience came up to me and said her company had just introduced a similar monitoring system. She told me she'd been feeling powerless and alone until she heard my story. That moment made all of it, the stress, the burnout, the paranoia, feel worth something. So, if anyone's still reading this after all this time, yeah, it got better, way better. But it didn't get better because the company changed. It got better because I walked away. Sometimes you can't fix a system that's designed to control you. Sometimes the only real power you have is leaving. When I think about that old job now, it's like remembering a bad relationship. You can see how much of yourself you gave up trying to please someone who was never going to trust you anyway. But once you're out, you realize you didn't need to prove anything. You just needed to breathe. These days, I breathe a lot easier. And for anyone still stuck in a place like that, being measured by clicks and keystrokes, I'll say this. They can track your mouse all they want, but they'll never measure your worth, not really. Stories number 10. My wife's strange story about that night still doesn't add up. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who'd question his wife's honesty. I trusted her more than anyone. We'd been married for 6 years, had 2 kids, and our relationship had always been built on open communication. Until that night, it started one Friday in early August. I got home late from work, around 10:30 p.m. Exhausted after a long shift, my wife, Lauren, said she was going to grab a quick coffee with our neighbor. Julia, just across the street. I didn't think much of it. They'd hung out a few times before, and I was just happy she had a friend in the neighborhood. She left around 10:45. I stayed up watching TV, then fell asleep on the couch when I woke up. The clock said 1:58 a.m., and Lauren wasn't home. At first, I thought maybe she was still chatting with Julia. I texted her, "You okay?" No response. I called. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. That's when the uneasy feeling started. She's never out that late, and she's not the type to ignore calls. I waited another 15 minutes, pacing around the kitchen. Before I called again, still nothing then. At 2:27 a.m., I heard her car pull into the driveway. She came in quietly, like she was trying not to wake me. "Where were you?" I asked. She froze for a second, surprised I was still awake. "At Julia's." We lost track of time. I looked at her, trying to read her expression. Something felt off. Her hair was messy, and her makeup smudged, like she'd been outside for a while. "You were at Julia's this whole time?" I asked. "Yes," she said, avoiding eye contact. "We were just talking on her porch. But here's the thing. Julia's porch faces our house. From the living room window, I can see it clearly. And not once did I see them out there. The light on her porch was off the whole time. I didn't want to accuse her of lying right away, so I played it cool. "Next time, just text me so I don't worry, okay?" She nodded quickly and went straight to the bathroom to shower. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I saw Julia outside watering her plants and went over to say hi. I mentioned the late-night hangout casually. She looked confused. "Last night?" "Oh no, I haven't seen Lauren since Wednesday." My stomach dropped. "You didn't hang out last night?" Julia shook her head. "No, I went to bed around 10. Everything okay?" I forced a smile and said, "Yeah, maybe she meant another night." But my heart was pounding. Lauren had lied. When I got back inside, she was in the kitchen making pancakes like nothing had happened. I sat down across from her and said, "I talked to Julia this morning. She said you weren't there last night." She froze. Then she gave me this weird half-smile and said, "She probably forgot. We were just outside for a bit." Julia said she was in bed by 10. Her expression changed instantly. Defensive, irritated. "Why are you checking up on me?" "I'm not," I said, trying to stay calm. "I just wanted to make sure you were safe. You came home at almost 2:30. She sighed. "Okay, fine. I wasn't at Julia's. I went for a drive. I just needed some space to think. You've been so distant lately. And I didn't want to argue. I didn't buy it, but I didn't press." The whole thing felt like a rehearsed backup story. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. She kept her phone closer than usual. She started going to yoga twice a week, classes she'd never mentioned before. One night, after she said she was going to yoga. I drove to the studio she claimed to go to. I sat in the parking lot for 30 minutes. She never showed. That's when I noticed something else. The neighbor 2 houses down, Mike, has a doorbell camera facing the street. I remembered seeing it blink when cars drove by. If Lauren really went out that night or came home when she said, maybe his camera caught it. I felt weird even thinking it, but the urge to know the truth was eating me alive. I told myself I'd just ask Mike casually. Maybe mention I thought I saw someone near our driveway late at night and wanted to check. But when I mentioned it to Lauren, just to gauge her reaction, she snapped. "Don't you dare involve the neighbors in our marriage," she yelled. That's humiliating. That outburst told me everything. Her anger wasn't about privacy. It was fear. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I looked out the window and saw a car I didn't recognize parked 2 houses down. It was dark blue, idling for a while, then driving off. My heart raced. I wanted to believe I was overthinking everything, but every instinct told me something was seriously wrong. 2 days later, I casually brought up the topic again. "Hey, Mike mentioned his doorbell camera caught a raccoon the other night." I lied. "He said it gets good footage." Lauren froze mid-bite at dinner. "Why are you so obsessed with that camera?" she asked. I shrugged. "Just saying, if you ever got home late again, it might have seen you pull in." Her face went pale. She dropped her fork, stood up, and walked out of the room without saying a word. That night she slept on the couch. The next morning, she was gone before I woke up. She left a note. "I can't live with someone who doesn't trust me. I'm staying at my sister's for a while." I sat there staring at the note for 10 minutes, torn between guilt and suspicion. If she was innocent, I'd pushed her away. If she was lying, she'd already left emotionally long before this. Later that day, I ran into Mike while taking out the trash. My heart was pounding, but I asked anyway. "Hey, weird question. Your doorbell camera, does it record cars on the street?" He said, "Yeah, it catches pretty much everything. Why?" I hesitated. Then I said, "I think someone was near my driveway last Friday around 2 a.m. Mind if I check?" He nodded and pulled it up on his phone, and there it was. 2:23 a.m. My wife's car pulling into the driveway. Then, 10 minutes before that, the same car parking half a block down. She got out and walked toward our house on foot, and right behind her, another figure, a man. He stayed near the car, waiting. When she went inside, he got back in and drove off. I felt sick. I thanked Mike, said I thought I recognized the guy, and went inside shaking. I didn't even know who the man was, but the way she tried to hide it, the lying, the deflection, the anger, it all made sense. I didn't confront her right away. I waited 2 days, trying to process everything. When I finally called her, I said, "I know you weren't alone that night. I saw the footage." Silence. Then softly she said, "I didn't cheat." "Who was he?" I asked. "A friend from work. I just needed to talk." "You wouldn't understand." That line hit like a punch. "You're right," I said. "I don't. We haven't spoken much since." She came back to pack some things, wouldn't look me in the eye, and said she'd be staying with her sister indefinitely. I'm not angry anymore, just empty. The worst part isn't that she lied. It's realizing how many small moments I overlooked. The late nights, the vague explanations. The phone turned face down, because I wanted to believe we were solid. Now, the only sound I hear when I walk through the house is silence, and the faint echo of a doorbell camera I wish I'd never asked about. Update? Piecing together the truth and facing the fallout? It's been about 2 weeks since that doorbell footage confirmed what I suspected. Lauren wasn't telling the full truth that night. Honestly, I don't even know where to begin. Part of me is relieved to finally know what happened, and part of me feels like I'm unraveling something I never wanted to see. After she left, the house felt eerily quiet. The kids were at their grandparents', so it was just me. Every room seemed different without her there. I went through our evening routines, making breakfast, doing laundry, and realized how much of my life had revolved around her presence. And her deception. I tried calling Lauren a few times. She didn't answer. I left a calm voicemail asking to talk, promising no accusations, just questions. She finally texted back late one night. "I'm not ready to talk. I need space." I understood that, but it didn't stop the anxiety. I started retracing her steps from that night, mentally noting every vague explanation she'd ever given when she was just out for a drive or meeting a friend. Patterns emerged. She'd been evasive before, yes, but nothing ever like this. The just a friend story didn't sit right. I knew I couldn't just wait, so I went back to Mike, The neighbor with the doorbell camera. He was hesitant at first, worried about privacy. But after I explained I just needed clarity for personal reasons, he agreed to pull up the footage again. The recording was more than just her car pulling in. There was a man waiting nearby. The same figure I noticed the first time. I could see him get out of his car, linger in the shadows, then approach Lauren when she parked. He stayed just long enough for them to speak, and then left. Seeing it again made my stomach churn. This wasn't just a walk around the block. This was deliberate. And while Lauren insisted he was just a friend, the way she tried to cover it up told me otherwise. I decided to call her, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. Lauren, we need to talk about that night. I saw the footage. She was quiet, long silence. Then finally, I don't know what you want me to say. It wasn't anything serious. I just needed to talk. You wouldn't understand. Her words felt like a punch. I don't understand because you lied to me. You let me believe one story while doing something else entirely. That's what I can't get past. She didn't argue. She just repeated, I wasn't cheating. I wanted to believe her. Part of me does, but the trust is fractured now. It's like trying to walk across a bridge that's missing planks. You hope it holds, but every step feels uncertain. We've been trying to communicate since then, but it's strained. Every conversation comes with a caution, every word measured. I asked her to explain why she felt she couldn't tell me the truth. She said, I was scared, you've been stressed. I didn't want to add to it. I understand stress can make people make bad choices, but this wasn't just a small mistake. This was a lie that lasted for hours. A lie that could have broken us completely. I told her we need couples counseling, not as a punishment, but as a necessity if we're going to fix this. She agreed reluctantly. She even said she'd speak to the man again, make boundaries clear. I don't know how much that helps, but it's a start. Meanwhile, life at home has been weird. I feel guilty for checking the camera, but I also feel like I had no choice. Ignoring my instincts would have been worse. The kids are blissfully unaware, thankfully. I've tried to maintain normalcy, but every small interaction reminds me of the underlying tension. Hannah, our friend from earlier? Sorry, Lauren. I mean me. I try to focus on our routines. Taking the kids to school, dinner, bedtime. But every night when I lie down, I replay the footage, the conversation, her words. You wouldn't understand, I keep asking myself. Do I forgive her? Can trust be rebuilt after seeing what I saw? And if I can't, what happens to a marriage when truth and trust no longer align? I haven't answered these questions yet. Some nights I feel like I should walk away. Other nights, I feel like we can get past this if we're honest, truly honest, moving forward. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing. I'm not willing to ignore my instincts, and I'm not willing to stay in a relationship where lies replace transparency. If Lauren wants this marriage to survive, she's going to have to prove she's worthy of the trust she broke. Until then, I'll keep trying to navigate the mess, balancing what I know with what I hope. And I'll keep checking, not out of suspicion, but because sometimes seeing the truth is the only way to protect yourself from the unknown. Final update, confrontation, confessions, and deciding what's next. It's been about 2 months since the doorbell camera incident, and this past month has been the most intense of my life. Lauren and I are still married in name, but emotionally, we've been walking on eggshells. Every conversation a negotiation, every glance a potential trigger. I've come to realize that the only way forward was to confront everything head-on. After weeks of back-and-forth texting, one evening I told her we needed to sit down and talk, face-to-face, without interruptions. She hesitated but finally agreed. We went to a small coffee shop a few blocks away. Neutral ground. I started calmly. Lauren, I need to understand why you lied that night. Not just about going for a drive, but why you hid the fact that you weren't alone. She looked down at her hands, nervously fidgeting with her coffee cup. I don't even know where to start. I wasn't planning on lying, but I panicked. You've been under so much stress at work, and I thought telling you the truth would make things worse. And when the man showed up, I didn't want you to worry, I asked. Who was he really? She sighed. It's someone from work. We've been close for months. Not romantically, I swear, but he's been going through some stuff, and I wanted to be there for him. I could feel the mixture of relief and lingering suspicion. Relief because she insisted it wasn't cheating. Suspicion because the secrecy and the late-night timing still didn't add up. I pressed further. Lauren, I understand wanting to help someone, but the way you went about it destroyed trust. Hiding it, lying about it, getting defensive. That's not helping anyone. That's risking everything we've built. Her eyes watered. I know. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't even think about how it would look. I just froze. I thought if I told you, you'd hate me. I took a deep breath. I wanted to believe her. But trust isn't rebuilt overnight. I don't hate you, I said. But I need proof that this isn't going to happen again. That if something similar comes up, you'll tell me. No secrets. No evasions, she nodded vigorously. Yes, I swear, I'll be completely transparent. I'll even go to counseling with you if that helps. Counseling. That was the turning point. We scheduled a session for the following week with a licensed therapist specializing in trust issues in long-term relationships. That first session was tense. She cried a lot, I cried a little, and we both yelled at some points. But by the end, the therapist helped us lay out boundaries, expectations, and a plan for rebuilding trust. One of the exercises was brutal. We had to list every time we'd felt lied to or hurt by the other. Seeing it all on paper was overwhelming. But the therapist emphasized, acknowledging the past is necessary for any healing to happen. Lauren admitted she'd been avoiding conflict for years, that she had a habit of lying about small things to keep the peace, which in hindsight escalated. I admitted I had been ignoring little signs for too long, hoping they were harmless. It wasn't just her fault. It was a failure of communication between us both. Over the next several weeks, we put the plan into practice. She shared her calendar, answered calls promptly, and I made an effort to check my own reactions. Not overreacting to small inconsistencies. It wasn't perfect, but slowly, the tension eased. Then came a real test, a work event that ran late, where Lauren stayed behind to support the same colleague. The same man from that night. She texted me every hour, sent photos of the office building and her car, and even asked me to call her once. I did, and hearing her voice, calm, transparent, I realized trust was returning. Cautiously but genuinely last weekend, we had dinner at home with Julia and Mike. Everything was normal. No hidden meetings, no evasive answers, just casual conversation, laughter, and shared stories. Lauren even apologized to Mike for the trouble the camera caused. And he laughed it off. I realized something critical. Trust isn't a switch. It's a series of consistent actions over time. Seeing her take responsibility, admit fear, and actively participate in rebuilding that trust was enough for me to start letting go of the anger. I'm not naive. I know this journey isn't over. There will be moments of doubt, moments where old habits could resurface. But for the first time since that night, I feel like we have a real foundation to work from. Open communication, honesty, and therapy aren't glamorous, but they're helping us heal. When I put the kids to bed, I looked over at Lauren sitting in the living room. Reading a book, I felt a mix of relief and cautious optimism. Maybe this marriage isn't perfect, and maybe trust will never be the same as it was. But it's growing, stronger, more aware, and more resilient than before. And that, I think, is enough for now. Stories number 11. My sister asked me to take care of her son while she worked abroad, and I said no. I never thought saying no to someone in my own family would make me feel like such a villain. But here I am, sitting in my kitchen, coffee gone cold, replaying every word of that phone call with my sister. I'm 34, single, and I live alone in a small townhouse in Ohio. My sister, Jessica, is 30. She's always been ambitious, the kind of person who sets her eyes on something and doesn't stop until she gets it. She's been a single mom since she was 22, when her son Eli was born. The father never stuck around for most of Eli's life. Jessica's been grinding, working 2 jobs, studying online, trying to build a better future for herself and her kid. I respect her for that. I really do. We've always had a complicated relationship, though. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the one who stayed home, who made sure our mom got to her appointments, who didn't get into trouble. Jessica was wild, impulsive, always chasing the next thrill. We were close enough when we were kids, but once we hit our 20s, it felt like we started living completely different lives. I stayed in Ohio. She moved all over, Chicago, Denver, now Houston. The last few years, she's been talking about going overseas for work. She got a degree in nursing and wanted to apply for a contract position in Germany. I thought it was just talk, something she said when she was frustrated or dreaming big. But a few months ago, she called and told me she'd been offered the job. It was a 2-year contract, great pay, housing included, everything she'd wanted. Then she said, "But I need your help with something big." I already had a bad feeling. She told me she needed someone to take care of Eli while she was gone. "Just until I get settled," she said. Then I'll bring him over once I've saved enough. I didn't even know what to say at first. Eli's 12, he's a good kid, polite, smart, a little shy. But he's not my kid. And I don't have the kind of life that fits a kid in it. I work long hours as an accountant. I like my quiet routines. My weekends are sacred. My place has one bedroom. A small guest room I turned into a home office. And zero kid-friendly anything. I asked her, what about Mom? She said Mom's too old now, which to be fair is true. Mom's 68 and dealing with arthritis and blood pressure issues. She couldn't keep up with a middle schooler, even if she wanted to. Then Jessica said, "You're the only person I trust. I can't leave him with strangers." That line hit hard. I asked, "How long are we talking about?" She hesitated, which already told me it wasn't good. Just, maybe 6 months? Maybe a year. It depends how fast I can get everything arranged. A year. I told her, "Jess, I can't. I don't have the space or the time. I'm barely keeping up with my own schedule." She got quiet. Then she said, "So you're just going to let me give up this opportunity? You're really saying no to helping your own sister?" That's when the guilt started creeping in. Because yeah, on paper it sounds awful. My sister finally gets a chance to change her life. And I can't watch her kid for a few months? But it wasn't a few months, it was a huge commitment. One that would upend my entire life. And no matter how much I love my nephew, I didn't sign up to be a parent. We argued for a while. She accused me of being selfish. I told her she was being unrealistic. She cried. I felt like crap, but I still said no. A week later, Mom called. She said, "Your sister told me what happened. Honey, maybe you could reconsider. It's just temporary," I said. "Mom, temporary isn't temporary with Jessica, you know that." And I wasn't wrong. Because when Jessica says a few months, it always turns into a year. Or 2, or more. Mom sighed and said, "Eli needs stability. You've always been good with him." That made me feel even worse. I am good with him. I love the kid. But love doesn't mean I can take on the role of full-time guardian for an indefinite period. After that, I didn't hear from Jessica for about 2 weeks. Then she sent me a long text saying she'd figured something out, that she didn't need me anymore, and that she knew where I stood. It felt like getting punched in the gut. A few days later, I found out through Mom that Jessica had left for Germany, and that Eli was staying with one of her friends, a woman named Tanya, who apparently owed her a favor. I don't know Tanya well, but from what I've heard, she's got 2 kids of her own and a chaotic life. The kind of person who means well but doesn't always follow through. Now it's been about 4 months since Jessica left. She calls Mom sometimes, sends photos of her apartment in Germany, talks about how great her job is, but she barely talks about Eli. Meanwhile, I get texts from him sometimes. Little ones. "Hey, Uncle Nate, how's your dog?" Or "I got an A on my history project." I always text back. I always tell him I'm proud of him, but sometimes I can tell he's lonely. One night he called me out of the blue, said he missed home, said Tanya's house was loud, that she yelled a lot, that her older son was kind of mean. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to go pick him up right then. But I also knew that if I did, I'd be stepping into something I couldn't easily step out of. I told Jessica about it the next day, and she just said, "He's fine. He needs to toughen up." That made me furious. She's always had this blind spot when it comes to her own choices. Since then, I've been torn. Every part of me wants to make sure Eli's okay, but I also know that if I take him in, it won't be temporary. Jessica will let it drag on, and I'll end up raising a kid who isn't mine while she keeps chasing her career across continents. But doing nothing feels awful too. I've started visiting Eli on weekends, taking him out to eat, letting him talk. I can tell he's just trying to hold it together. Last weekend, he looked at me and said, "Can I stay with you sometimes?" I told him, "Maybe during school breaks." "Buddy." He nodded, but he looked disappointed. I don't think he understands that my no to Jessica wasn't a no to him. But how do you explain that to a 12-year-old? I feel like everyone in my family sees me as the selfish one now. Mom barely talks to me about it. Jessica's still in Germany, posting pictures of castles and fancy dinners while her kid's sleeping on a couch in a house that isn't his. And I'm here, stuck between wanting to rescue my nephew and not wanting to resent my sister for putting me in that position. The thing is, I don't think I'm wrong. I think I'm setting boundaries I should have set a long time ago. But that doesn't make it feel any less awful. Sometimes I lie awake at night wondering if I'm just rationalizing. If maybe the right thing, the good thing, would have been to say yes, no matter how much it cost me. Then I think about Eli's voice on the phone, small and tired, and about Jessica's voice, confident and detached. And I realized that love doesn't always mean cleaning up someone else's mess. Sometimes it means refusing to let them keep making one. And I hope someday Eli understands that. It's been about 9 months since I wrote that post, and I still think about it sometimes, especially on the nights when my phone buzzes and it's Eli's name lighting up the screen. I didn't expect anyone to read that post when I first wrote it. I just needed to let it out somewhere, because saying no to family felt like breaking some kind of unspoken rule. But reading through the comments, people telling me I wasn't heartless, that setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel, helped me more than I realized at the time. Still, I've learned that doing the right thing doesn't always feel right while you're doing it. The situation with Jessica, it got worse before it got better. Not long after I posted, I got a call from Tanya, the friend my sister had left Eli with. It was a Thursday evening, late, I remember, because I was sitting on the couch with takeout, half asleep, when my phone buzzed. She sounded stressed, said she couldn't keep Eli anymore. Apparently, her ex-husband had started visiting again and things were tense. Which, from the sound of her voice, meant unsafe. She said, "I can't have him here. It's not fair to him." My stomach dropped. I asked if Jessica knew. She said she'd emailed her a few times but hadn't gotten a reply. So I called Jessica myself. No answer. I texted her. No reply, then I called again. Eventually, she picked up. It was morning in Germany, and she sounded annoyed like I was interrupting her breakfast. I said, "Jess, what's going on with Eli? He can't stay with Tanya anymore." She sighed and said, "I'll figure it out," I said. "You've had 9 months to figure it out. You can't just leave him there." She got defensive. "Do you think I don't care about my own kid? I'm working every day to build a future for him. That's why I'm doing this," I said. "Then take responsibility for him now," we argued, loud, angry. The kind of argument that comes from years of built-up resentment. Finally, I told her, "If you don't have a plan by the end of the week, I'm driving to get him. But I want you to understand. If I take him in, it's because you didn't, not because I'm your safety net." She hung up on me. 2 days later, I got a text. "Fine, do what you want. I'll send you money when I can." So that weekend, I drove 3 hours to Tanya's house. Eli was waiting on the porch with a small duffel bag and a backpack. He didn't say much when I pulled up, just gave me this small, tired smile. I asked if he was ready, and he said, "Yeah." The ride home was quiet. He watched the highway out the window, earbuds in, while I tried to think of what to say that wouldn't sound like an apology. When we got to my house, I showed him the guest room, the one that used to be my office. I'd spent the previous night clearing out my desk and buying a new bed. Sheets, a small dresser, it wasn't much, but it was his. That first week was rough. I hadn't lived with a kid before, let alone a preteen who'd been bounced between homes. He was polite, always said thank you, but I could tell he was on edge, like he was waiting for me to get tired of him too. He didn't talk about Jessica much. When he did, it was always careful, like he was defending her. "She's really busy, but she's working hard," he'd say. Or, "She said she'll visit soon." I didn't contradict him. I just nodded and said, "I'm sure she is." A month passed. Then 2. Jessica called a few times, but her calls got shorter every week. Sometimes she'd miss a scheduled call altogether. Once, Eli waited by the laptop for an hour before giving up and going to bed. That night, I heard him crying quietly in his room. I wanted to call her and scream, but what good would that do? Instead, I walked into his room, sat on the edge of his bed, and said, "Hey, you can be mad. You don't have to pretend you're okay." He didn't answer at first. Then he said, "I just don't get why she left me." That hit me harder than I expected. I told him, "She didn't leave because she doesn't love you. She left because she thought she had to. But that doesn't make it right." He nodded, but I could tell that didn't fix anything. Over time, though, things started to settle. We got into a rhythm. I'd pack his lunch in the mornings, drop him off at school, go to work, and we'd have dinner together most nights. He started helping with small chores, taking the dog out, washing dishes, and slowly he started laughing again. The first time he made a joke at my expense, about my terrible cooking, I nearly cried from relief. Around Christmas, Jessica finally sent a package from Germany. A few toys, a hoodie, a note that said, "Miss you, buddy. I'll be home soon." He opened it quietly, then looked at me and said, "Do you think she means it this time?" I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to crush whatever hope he had left. So I said, "I think she's trying," after the holidays. Jessica called and said she'd extended her contract another year. I just sat there, staring at the phone in disbelief. She sounded cheerful, like she'd just told me she'd gotten a promotion. I said, "What about Eli?" She said, "He's doing great with you, right? Maybe it's better if he stays there a little longer. Less disruption." I wanted to say something. Anything. But the words just wouldn't come. That night, after Eli went to bed, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the wall, thinking about how easily she'd handed off her son like he was an errand. But then I looked down the hall, at the closed door to his room, and realized he wasn't just my nephew anymore. He was my responsibility. So I started making it official. I talked to a lawyer, filed for temporary guardianship, and started the process of getting him into therapy. Jessica didn't fight it. She barely reacted. She signed the papers I sent her and said, "Whatever you think is best." And weirdly enough, that was the moment I stopped feeling guilty. Because I finally understood that saying no to her back then wasn't cruel. It was necessary. She wasn't ready to be a parent, and no amount of guilt or family pressure could change that. But now, with the situation as it was, saying yes wasn't enabling her anymore. It was protecting him. Eli's been living with me for 6 months now. Officially, he's joined a soccer team, made a couple of friends, and brought home a report card last week that he was proud of. Sometimes when we're driving somewhere, he'll tell me random facts about space or video games or whatever he's into that week. And I think, this kid's going to be okay. Jessica still calls every once in a while, but it's rare. Eli doesn't talk about her much anymore. I think he stopped expecting her to come home soon. He's not angry, just resigned. In that quiet way kids get when they've been let down too many times. Last weekend, he asked if he could call me Uncle Nate at school or just Nate. I asked why, and he said, "Because everyone keeps asking if you're my dad, and I don't know what to say." That one broke me a little, I told him. "You can tell them I'm your uncle who loves you and takes care of you." "That's enough." He smiled and said, "Yeah, that works." Sometimes I still feel that old guilt creep in, that whisper saying I should have done more sooner. But when I look at him now, sleeping in his own bed, safe, happy, healing, I know I did what I could when it really mattered. And maybe that's what family is supposed to be. Not blind sacrifice, not cleaning up every mess, but stepping up when it's the right thing, for the right reasons. So yeah, Jessica's still overseas, chasing her version of happiness, and I'm here, a single guy who somehow ended up with a 12-year-old under his roof. But I don't regret it, because this time, my yes came from love, not guilt, and that makes all the difference. It's been almost 2 years since Eli came to live with me full-time, and I honestly didn't think I'd ever be sitting down to write another update. Things had finally leveled out. I'd adjusted to being the guy who keeps track of soccer schedules and parent-teacher nights. Eli had settled in, started high school, grown a few inches, and somehow managed to eat half the groceries every week. And then Jessica came back. It happened quietly. No dramatic phone call. No warning. One Friday afternoon, I got a text that just said, "Landed, can we talk?" I stared at my phone for a good 5 minutes before replying. She'd been gone for nearly 3 years. 3 years of birthdays, school projects, scraped knees, doctor visits. She'd missed all of it. I told her she could come by on Sunday, mostly because I needed a couple of days to process the fact that she was actually back on US soil when she showed up. I almost didn't recognize her at first. She looked good, rested, confident, but there was this strange distance in her eyes, like she wasn't sure what world she was stepping into. She had a suitcase with her, but I knew she wasn't planning to stay with me. She was wearing expensive clothes, designer bag, the kind of stuff that said she'd done well for herself over there. Eli was upstairs doing homework when she knocked. I opened the door and for a second we just stood there, looking at each other. She smiled, small, nervous. "Hey, Nate. Hey, Jess. I missed you." I nodded but didn't know what to say. I didn't want to be cruel, but there was a knot of resentment sitting in my chest that I couldn't just push aside. We sat at the kitchen table, and she started talking about her job, the travel, how she'd been saving up and finally transferred back home. It all sounded rehearsed, like she was working through a script she'd practiced on the flight. Finally, I cut her off gently. "What are you really here for, Jess?" She hesitated, then looked me in the eye. "I want to see Eli," I said. "Of course, you should." But something in her tone made my stomach twist. She said, "I want to bring him home." And there it was. I didn't yell, I didn't even raise my voice. I just leaned back and said, "Home? This is his home." Her eyes filled with tears. "He's my son, Nate. I made mistakes, I know. But I did what I had to do. I worked hard so I could come back and give him a better life," I said quietly. "He has a life here. She started to cry for real then. Not manipulative tears, just raw ones. Do you think I don't know that? I read your updates, I saw his pictures, you've done so much for him, but I need to be his mom again. I told her I wasn't trying to keep him from her, but she needed to understand. Taking him away now would undo everything he'd rebuilt. He finally had stability. We agreed that she'd see him that evening. When I told Eli, he froze. He didn't smile or run to the door. He just sat there at the kitchen table, staring at his math homework. Then he said quietly, "She's really back?" "Yeah, buddy," I said. "She wants to see you." He nodded. Okay, when she walked in, it was awkward. She tried to hug him, but he hesitated, then gave her this half-hearted, polite hug, the kind you give a distant relative. She looked gutted, but she covered it with a shaky smile. They sat and talked for about an hour while I stayed out of the way. I heard bits and pieces. Her asking about school, soccer, friends, him giving short, neutral answers. When she asked if he missed her, there was a long pause before he said. Sometimes, after she left, he didn't say much. He just went up to his room later that night. I found him sitting on his bed, scrolling through old photos of her on his tablet. He looked up and said, "She wants me to live with her, doesn't she?" I hesitated. "Yeah." She mentioned it. He nodded slowly, then said, "I don't think I want to." That one sentence nearly broke me. We ended up talking for hours, about what home means, about how love doesn't always come with good timing. I told him that whatever happened, I'd support his choice. A week later, Jessica asked to meet again, this time with both of us. She looked calmer, like she'd had time to think. She said, "I talked to a family counselor. They said it's better to take it slow. Maybe I can see him on weekends for now." Eli agreed. And that's what we did. At first it was awkward. He'd go to her apartment every other Saturday. Sometimes he'd come home early. Sometimes he'd stay the whole weekend. I could tell she was trying. She showed up to his games, helped him with school projects, even made an effort to get to know some of his friends. But there was a quiet wall between them that love alone couldn't fix. One night after a game, she and I were packing up chairs and she said, "You've been more of a parent to him than I ever was." I hate that, but it's true, I told her. "You're still his mom, Jess. That doesn't change, but you've got to keep showing up." Every time, no disappearing, she nodded, eyes glassy. "I will." It's been 8 months since that talk. She's kept her word. She hasn't missed a single weekend or phone call. Slowly, I've seen Eli start to trust her again. It's not the same as before. It probably never will be. But it's something real. Last week, he turned 14. We threw a small party in the backyard. Just a few friends, a cake, burgers on the grill. Jessica came early to help set up. I caught her at one point, standing off to the side. Watching him laugh with his friends, she had this soft smile, like she was both proud and sad at the same time. Later that night, after everyone left and the house was quiet, she came up to me and said, "Thank you for not hating me." I told her, "I did for a while, but you came back. You're doing the work now. That's what matters." She hugged me then, a long, real hug, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. Eli came downstairs a little later, already in his pajamas, and said, "Mom said she's proud of me." I smiled. "She should be. You've been through a lot," he grinned. "You too, Uncle Nate." That night, after he went to bed, I sat out on the porch with a beer, looking up at the stars, and it hit me how far we'd all come. There were no perfect endings, no movie-style reconciliation, just a messy, slow rebuild, but it was real. Jessica and I still co-parent, if you can call it that. He stays with her on some weekends, with me the rest. We go to parent-teacher meetings together now, awkward but united. And once in a while, when Eli cracks a joke that makes her laugh, I see that same light in her eyes that used to be there when we were kids, before everything got complicated. So yeah, that's where we are. Not perfect, not simple, but steady. And if you'd told me 3 years ago that I'd end up raising my nephew and sharing custody with my sister after all the chaos, I'd have laughed in your face, but here we are, a weird, stitched-together family that somehow works. Sometimes the right thing isn't walking away or stepping in. It's staying long enough to help someone else learn how to stay too. That's what I learned. That's what Eli taught both of us. Stories number 12. I refused to let my mom move in. After she lost her house when I was a kid, my mom used to say, "Family is everything." She'd throw that line around a lot, especially when she needed something. From my dad before he left, from relatives she'd borrowed money from, or from me when I was old enough to start working part-time at 16. But when I needed her, that whole family is everything thing didn't really apply. I'm 32 now, and I live in Portland with my fiancé, Evan. We've been together for 5 years, just bought our first home last summer. A small, two-bedroom craftsman with a yard that's honestly the nicest thing I've ever owned. It's not fancy, but it's ours. We worked hard for it. My mom, Lynn, has always been the kind of person who creates her own chaos. She's 58, never really held down a steady job, and has a long history of bad financial decisions. She's the queen of get-rich-quick ideas. Everything from essential oils to day trading to flipping vintage furniture she never actually flips. She's been evicted twice, burned through her savings more times than I can count, and constantly leans on people until they get fed up for years. I tried to be the good daughter. I paid her rent once when I was 24. I helped her get her car out of impound when she forgot to renew her registration. I even co-signed on a small loan for her, back when I was too naive to know better. She defaulted on it. Guess who ended up paying? So when she called me 3 months ago, crying, I already knew it wasn't just a social call. She said she'd lost her house, apparently. She'd fallen behind on her mortgage for nearly a year and didn't realize it would get this bad. She wanted to move in with me just for a few months. At first, I didn't know what to say. I told her I'd talk to Evan and call her back when I hung up. He just gave me this look. One of those looks that says you already know what I'm going to say. But I'll say it anyway, babe, he said carefully. I know she's your mom, but this house barely fits us. And we both know how she is. He wasn't wrong. My mom isn't the kind of person who just stays temporarily. She's the kind of person who arrives with 3 suitcases, 2 emotional support pets, and a reason why nothing's ever her fault. Still, guilt hit me hard. I felt like a terrible person for even hesitating. She's my mom, she raised me, sort of. I decided to at least go see her and talk in person. Her house was already mostly empty when I got there. Boxes everywhere, furniture gone, lights off in half the rooms. She hugged me like I was her lifeline, crying about how unfair the bank had been, how nobody warned her, how she just needed a fresh start. When I asked what her plan was, she said, You're my plan. That hit like a punch. I tried to stay calm. I told her I'd help her look into rental assistance programs, maybe help her find a roommate situation or an extended stay motel until she got back on her feet. But she shut that down immediately. Why would I waste money on that when you have a house? She snapped. It's just for a few months, except I know my mom. A few months would turn into a year. A year would turn into me paying for everything again. So I said no. I told her gently that it wasn't a good idea, that Evan and I were still adjusting to homeownership, that the house didn't have enough space, that we needed our privacy. I even offered to cover her first month in a small rental while she sorted things out. She went silent. Then she said, Wow, you really turned out like your father. That one stung. We didn't talk for a week after that. Then she started calling again, leaving guilt-tripping voicemails. I can't believe my own daughter would abandon me. You'll understand when I'm gone. That kind of emotional blackmail that sounds dramatic, but feels designed to break you down. Evan told me not to cave. He's been amazing through all of this. Patient, but firm. He reminded me of every time she'd taken advantage of me in the past, how each favor turned into a disaster. Still, it ate at me. I grew up watching her struggle, and part of me always felt like it was my job to save her. But another part of me knows she's never learned from her mistakes because someone, usually me, always cleaned them up for her. About a month later, I found out she'd been telling relatives that I kicked her out and chose my boyfriend over family. My Aunt Debbie called and chewed me out for being heartless. I tried to explain, but she didn't want to hear it. None of them offered to take Mom in either, of course. They just wanted to lecture me from a safe distance. Last week, my mom called again, sounding calmer. She said she'd found a small place about an hour away. A roommate situation, cheap rent. Not ideal, but better than nothing. She didn't thank me for the help I'd offered before. She just said, Don't worry, I'll survive somehow. That's her way of saying she's still mad. I hung up feeling this weird mix of guilt and relief. Relief that she had somewhere to go. Guilt because deep down, part of me was glad it wasn't with me. Evan and I finally feel settled again. The house is peaceful. We cook dinner together without tension hanging in the air. No phone calls at midnight. No sudden emergencies that become my responsibility. But I'd be lying if I said it doesn't hurt. I keep thinking about her sitting in some cramped rental, probably blaming me for everything. And part of me still feels like that little kid who just wanted her mom to be okay. Sometimes family really is everything, but only if it's healthy. And sometimes protecting your peace means saying no to the person who taught you the word family in the first place. Update. It's been a few months since my mom moved into that small rental, and I've had a lot of time to process everything. Honestly, the emotional roller coaster hasn't ended, but at least now it feels more manageable. After she moved out, I thought the guilt would disappear. It didn't. Every time my phone buzzed with a call or a text from her, I felt that old familiar tightening in my chest. Evan noticed it too. One night over dinner he asked me, "Do you ever think you made the wrong choice?" I wanted to say yes. Part of me still did. The idea of being a bad daughter gnawed at me, but I reminded myself of all the times she'd relied on me in the past. How each favor I gave had turned into more stress. More debt, more responsibility. I couldn't repeat that cycle again. I started journaling about it. Writing everything down helped me see patterns I hadn't fully admitted to myself. My mom has always struggled with independence and accountability. That's not new, and no matter how much I wanted to rescue her, I couldn't fix that for her, only she could, interestingly. My mom's anger toward me has softened a little. She calls less frequently now and doesn't leave the guilt-laden voicemails as often. I think part of her is realizing that my no wasn't about punishing her. It was about boundaries. She's not happy about it, but she's adjusting. I also started noticing subtle changes in myself. For the first time in years, I feel a sense of autonomy in my own home. I can cook dinner without interruption, work from my office without being worried about someone barging in, and sleep at night without dreading a crisis call. Evan says he notices I'm calmer, more present, and less anxious overall. He's right, a funny side effect. My mom has started learning how to manage her own life a little better. She's taking a second job, keeping a small budget, and even decorated her new apartment in a way that makes it feel like hers. She still calls, but the tone is different, less accusatory, more conversational. I'm realizing that maybe stepping back gave her the space to grow in ways I couldn't force while she was living under my roof. I won't lie, some days I still feel guilty. I see her Facebook posts about life in her new place, and I catch myself thinking, am I being selfish? But then I remember all the times I've been stretched thin for her needs at the expense of my own. My life is my responsibility now, not hers. Evan has been amazing through all of this. He supports my decisions and reminds me that having healthy boundaries doesn't mean I don't care. In fact, it's the opposite. It means I care enough about both of us to keep our life stable. Looking back, saying no to my mom was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. It hurt, and it still stings, but it also saved me. It saved my relationship with Evan, my mental health, and my sense of independence. The irony is, our relationship with my mom has improved since she moved out. We talk more openly now, without the tension of cohabitation. I can love her from a distance, and she can exist in her own space without me constantly cleaning up messes, literal or metaphorical. I've realized that family isn't about proximity or obligation. It's about connection, respect, and mutual care. Sometimes the best way to support someone is to let them stand on their own 2 feet, even if it's hard to watch. And for anyone out there who's struggling with a similar choice, saying no doesn't make you a bad person, it makes you human. It makes you someone who understands that your well-being matters too. I still love my mom, deeply. But I'm finally starting to love myself in a way that's long overdue. Final update. It's been about a year since my mom moved into her own place, and I feel like I can finally write this with some clarity. Looking back, the entire situation was a turning point for me. Not just in my relationship with my mom, but in my relationship with myself. After the initial months, things settled into a rhythm I didn't expect. My mom started paying her rent on time, cooking her own meals, and even started volunteering at a local community center. She still calls and texts, but the tone has changed. She's no longer trying to guilt me or manipulate me emotionally. In fact, the last time we spoke, she actually thanked me for setting boundaries. It was awkward at first. I honestly didn't believe she could say that, but it felt genuine. Evan and I have thrived in our home. The house feels like a sanctuary now. We can plan our weekends, entertain friends, and even have quiet evenings without anxiety hanging over us. Our relationship has grown stronger too, because we weren't constantly navigating the chaos that would have come with my mom living with us. For the first time in years, we feel fully like a team. The biggest shift, though, has been in how I view my own responsibilities. For the longest time, I equated caring for someone with sacrificing myself. Every decision was filtered through the lens of how it would affect my mom. Even if it was at my expense, This situation forced me to reevaluate that mindset. I realized that helping someone doesn't mean you abandon your own life, your own boundaries, or your own well-being. Real support is sometimes letting go. Interestingly, my mom's independence has improved in ways I didn't anticipate. She's more organized, she's managing her finances better, and she's even joined a small social group nearby. I think having her own space forced her to take ownership of her life in a way that living with me would never have achieved. It's strange, but seeing her grow like this has made me feel proud and relieved that my decision to say no didn't damage her. It helped her. There were still moments of guilt. I had to work through the years of conditioning that made me feel responsible for my mom's happiness. Therapy helped a lot. I realized that part of loving someone is sometimes stepping back and allowing them to face their own challenges. I don't have to rescue her, and she doesn't have to live under my roof to be my mother. Recently, we had a visit where she came over for dinner. There was laughter, conversation, and mutual respect. No tension, no guilt, no obligation, just family. It was the first time in my adult life that I felt like we had a healthy relationship. That moment made all the previous anxiety, guilt, and stress feel worth it. I've also noticed a personal change. I'm more confident in setting boundaries in other areas of my life. Work, friendships, and even in my engagement planning with Evan. Saying no once, and meaning it, made it easier to assert myself in ways that protect my mental and emotional health. So, in the end, refusing to let my mom move in wasn't about being selfish. It was about preserving my home, my relationship, and my well-being. It was about giving both of us the space to grow into healthier, more responsible adults. And now, when I think about family, I finally feel like I understand what my mom meant years ago. Family isn't about proximity, convenience, or control. It's about connection, respect, and support that doesn't cost your own peace of mind. I don't regret my decision. It was painful at the time, yes, but it saved us both in the long run. And for the first time in years, I feel like our relationship is built on choice rather than obligation, and that makes all the difference. I've learned that sometimes, the hardest no is the most loving yes, both to yourself and to the people you care about.